We are here. Dean Allison, MP, Niagara West for the Conservative Party.
Good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you again for coming out, Dean. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I have no idea how long we're going to do this for. I'm sure we'll run out of time before it happens. But for the thing I know I want to start with is thanking you for coming. Not on many levels. Like I appreciate you coming out. We've become friends over the years. I even told you how I've extended the invite beyond people that I know. I sent an email invite to every current MP, and I was hoping to have 3 responses. I only had 1, and it was you.
Yay!
And I was not only hoping to get 3 yeses, I was hoping to get 3 responses from people just saying, I got your invite, thank you, and then something. But I really appreciate because not only do I appreciate because I think we see a lot of things the same way, but I appreciate that you came here. It's a busy time for you during the campaign. And I want to thank you too. As I've learned more over the years, you're one of the people amongst talking to many people that I've learned more about politics. And I appreciate even more what you do representing us. And I understand that it's a tough gig.
Well, it's not always fun. Some days it's fun, but you got to take your good days with the bad days, right? So,
So thank you for all those things.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
Now, where to start? Like, I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll start with something that I wanted to talk to you about before, and we touched on it a little bit off of camera, but the first thing that really got my attention was a little while ago when Parliament got shut down. And I don't know, that was, I thought, pretty wild. Is it open or closed now?
No, it hasn't reopened. I mean, we were done sort of the middle of December.
Right.
Supposed to come back the last week in January. Mm-hmm. And instead we were prorogued for 2 months. So January and February and then to March. So 2 months. And then they called an election. We were supposed to go back on 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And then they called election the week before we were supposed to come back. So we have not been in Parliament since the middle of February. It's now the first part of April. And we've got this, major issue with the U.S. and tariffs and what's going on. We should have been in the House of Commons talking about solutions and how we can maybe figure this out and fix it and offer up some suggestions and debate and have some transparency and all that stuff. But that wasn't meant to be. That's a long time not to be in Parliament, right?
When Parliament is closed down, you still have, all the MPs still have work to do, right?
We work in our constituency. I mean, I may have been back to Ottawa once for some meetings, but the reality is we're doing constituency work at that point. But you're not discussing the issues of the nation, right? In terms of, okay, we got a major problem on our hands with what's going on south of the border, potentially. What do we do? And we should be having some of those discussions, sort of publicly. But like I said, their Liberal Party was a party in crisis at that point in time. Justin, didn't have the support of his own members of Parliament, and they were sort of pushing him out. And so when they recognized that they weren't going to let him off the hook, he wasn't, they were just becoming too vocal.
Yeah.
That's when he resigned, and they sort of set up, what's that going to look like? Well, need a new leader. Well, we don't have time. We're supposed to go back. Oh, let's prorogue the House so we can have time to have a leadership. All those things happen as a result. What may have happened, someone like Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, back in December, if he had pulled the plug when we were talking about it with confidence votes, we could have probably ended up with an election and we could have moved forward. Now, if Justin had decided to leave sooner, then they could have done a leadership during last summer. You know what I'm saying? And that's the crazy thing about politics. You never know what you're going to get.
It's wild.
It's crazy.
It's so wild. And that's the thing that when I'm looking at it myself, I see that there's a lot of strategy that goes into these things. Whether wherever you lie on the scale, I see them doing this, and there's things that I respect about it and things that frustrate me because I respect strategizing when doing anything, but it also frustrates me when they're putting the party before the people.
Sure.
So, because when you're doing all of those things, you're not doing it because you care about Canada. You're doing it as I see it, because you want to win your next election.
Absolutely. You're trying to save your own bacon, right? That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Before we get even into that stuff, let's start with you. Like, you've been MP for how long? A little bit about you and a little bit of that stuff.
So I got elected back in 2004. So that was over 20 years ago.
Wow.
It'll be 21 years this June, should I get reelected. And I also ran previous to that in 2000. Mm-hmm. So this is my ninth election.
Ninth election, if you can believe that. So normally you sit for a term of 4 years, right? So that would mean 4 years divided by 20. That'd be maybe 5 elections. I've actually had 9, not 5. So that makes it, minority governments played a large factor. The only two majority governments I've been involved with were 2011, 2015. So a conservative majority in 2011, a liberal majority in 2015. The rest of them have been minority governments. So out of 9. Who was prime minister in 11?
So it was Stephen Harper.
And
2015 was Justin Trudeau. Yeah.
Wow.
So and that sort of plays on the psyche of the Canadian people as well, right? It seems like we've been doing a lot of elections, right? I mean, we just finished a provincial election in Ontario. So that matters as well. So sometimes there's voter fatigue. Not necessarily. I'm just saying that there's always stuff going on. So you got to there's a lot of busyness in people's lives.
Right.
So really trying to get them the message or tell them what you're running on or what you're doing becomes difficult when you have back-to-back elections and you have just lots of noise going on in the world, right?
A lot of noise is that. And that's the one thing that I'm a goal with this podcast is that I'm not doing this strictly to try and sway people blue. What I'm trying to do, even though that's the way I lean, and here I think you're our best representative, but primarily what I'm trying to do is help people understand and educate, because it's one thing that I have a hard time with, and I feel that I know I'm not the smartest guy in any room, including this one, but I try my best to learn things, and it's very hard to learn with how much misinformation there is out there. Like, getting to the truth is not easy.
Yeah. No, it's always a challenge. And when there's a lot of voices, right?
So many and so many things. Like, so that the one thing that I appreciate about you being here is we're talking and it's coming right from your mouth versus from any media or anything where who knows what.
Well, and you want to always look at where it's coming from. Like, we've talked about defunding the CBC. Mm-hmm. So how do you think the CBC feels about us in a campaign right now? They're not going to do us any favors. So
no favors.
Zero favors. So the challenge is, I always tell people to follow the money, right? Always look and find out if someone's job's on the line or financially that's going to, a lot of mainstream media gets subsidies from the governments. So their job is to keep that, in their minds, to keep that money coming. So that will sometimes distort their truth based on, trying to slant something. And let's be honest, if we look at everyone's perspective, if you come from the NDP or you're liberal or conservative, you've got a different worldview. So now we just need to get on the table. What's the worldview? So a conservative believes in less government, more power to the people. People should have more control over their lives. So, if you have a conversation with me, I'm not going to be advocating for bigger government. Right?
Yeah.
But if you talk to an NDP or maybe even a liberal, they're going to say, government is can fix all our problems. I said, no, government won't fix your problems. As a matter of fact, when you start saying we're going to give government more money and more control, I get nervous. I'm thinking, I've been there 20 years. I haven't seen them, they get some things right. And we trust them, right? By and large, they're nonpartisan, et cetera. But it's the policies that a ruling party or a ruling government of the day asks them to implement, which, that's where we should be debating. That's where we should be having conversations around. And sometimes we miss that, right? We're talking about other things that are red herrings. They're not even.
That happens a lot.
All the time. We don't even talk about the policy, about what people are thinking. So that's always the challenge. And I always say, you gotta keep asking questions and find out where people are coming from to maybe understand why they're saying what they're saying.
So I think that's a good one. I think this is something I've understood more as time goes on. But for people listening, maybe a little bit of an understanding of the different parties and perspectives and ideologies. Like you just mentioned, conservatives tend to lean more towards less government and more money and power to the people, right? And
Absolutely.
like that's more, I guess, where they say on the right side of the scale, right? And then in the middle is supposed to be liberal and then NDP.
Well, I think this current Liberal government under Justin Trudeau and then under Mark Carney has actually they've left the middle altogether.
Right.
And I hate using the term left and right.
I know,
what
I
is
understand.
that? I just
what's a different way to...
No, I just say like, what do you think? I think our party is the one that believes in empowering people is more important than having government. So, I think that the parties on the left tend to lead more towards socialism, right? So it's kind of like, what do you think? Do you believe in a free market system? You believe that, you should have the right to invest money and own homes and stuff. I mean, we talk about the Liberals' plan for housing. It really doesn't talk about home ownership at all, right? And they just made this announcement in the last couple of days. So, the challenge is we believe in home ownership. We believe that everyone has the right to have a home, own a home. They work hard for it, all that kind of stuff. So that's where you'll start to see the differences. And then, like I said, maybe the NDP in the past would have said, we champion the union workers. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they're more, they more champion sort of the elites, just kind of like the Liberals do. It's like kind of those people that live in, big degrees and live in big cities, right? They think they should tell us how we should live our lives, right?
And then, yes, the other parties are, what is there? There's Green, there's Québécois.
Yeah, Bloc in Quebec,
Bloc.
yep.
Is that
Yep.
Bloc?
Yep.
So Bloc, I'm not even sure, do they lean more right?
No,
Should
no.
I be saying right and left? I don't even know.
No. I would think that I would just say, do they support more free enterprise or more government intervention? That's what I kind of like lean towards. The Bloc prefers more government intervention.
Interesting.
And they lead more towards socialism, more to the fact that their big thing in Parliament is the separating Canada, Quebec from Canada. So it's kind of ironic that we would actually have a party that sits in a federal government paid for by Canadian people and Canadian taxpayers, and their whole job is to break up the country. It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre when you think about that. But when separation is low, like people feel like the country's united, then their response, the favor for the party goes down. When they feel like their voices aren't being heard, or there's more angst, I think sometimes that's when their popularity rises. So that's always when you look at what's going on in the country, if there's issues and you go back and forth, those are sometimes you could probably get a sense of when they'll be popular and when they won't. So if everyone's upset and angry, and they're angry with Ottawa, the provinces are all mad at Ottawa, then the chances are individual provinces will maybe a little bit more a little bit more testy and some of that stuff. So
and then the Green Party. Is there anybody that holds a seat from the Green Party?
There's actually two. It's Elizabeth May. And there's another individual as well. So like I said, I think they are. Well, I can't figure them out sometime. I think that party does well because of people know who Elizabeth May is. Maybe that's.
I don't even know who she is.
Exactly.
But from what I know, they focus more on the environment.
Absolutely,
that's their priority is the environment, right? Yeah. Which is probably a good thing.
It's not bad. And sometimes with all these parties, individual things will line up, right? Yeah. It's not like every party you think, oh man, everything you do is terrible. It's like there'll be times when parties will overlap with, hey, that's a good idea. We can support stuff like that.
It's nice when that happens.
It doesn't happen often, but it is nice. For sure it is.
You know what I find? And please correct me if I'm wrong at any point. I don't want to say that more times, but it seems like at the top level, and before maybe you get into who's bullshitting or not, that the vision is the same for all the parties, that they want the best for the country. Now, whether or not they execute it or what their decisions are, but I don't think any of them would say that that's not our intentions.
Yeah, I think they would say that, but I think that when you get liberal, when you get individuals and individual parties, then it's sometimes, like I think, the NDP and the current leader, Jagmeet Singh, I think is one of the worst NDP leaders we've ever had in this whole country. And so the challenge is...
And you've seen a lot.
I've seen a lot, over the last 25 years.
Yeah.
I think when you see him, he is like, that's all about him, because for him, he's never supported the Liberals as far as their party's tanking right now. Their party's being destroyed because they continue to prop up the Liberals. That's a challenge. See, it's about him. It's about the party. It's about the fact they don't have any money in the bank, and he can't have a campaign plane. He's actually going to drive in a bus. It's not a school bus, but you know what I'm saying. He's got to drive a bus. And then the Liberal Party, from my perspective, and people may argue me, it's always been about power for them. And so I think that why they say stuff and they never deliver on things is because they want to say what people want to hear, knowing fully well that they maybe they have good intentions to deliver. What my take on is watching these guys in power for the last 10 years is that either they have no clue how to deliver it or they're incompetent. It's kind of like, hey, we make these, hey, we're going to plant 2 billion trees, or whatever we're going to build 2 million homes. They have no plan. They have no way to be able to execute it. They said something like we're going to build 2 million homes by the year 2030 or whatever the case may be, which would mean building 500,000 homes a year. In the industry, the most we've ever built, or the average would be like 250. So
it's crazy.
How can you make statements like that? Either you're misleading, lying, or you're just completely incompetent. You don't know what you're talking about. So what? So when and that's what gives politicians a bad name, right?
Yes,
we want to do this, and then we have no clue how we're going to do it. Then people think you guys are idiots. Just stop talking. So that's what that's what you need to do. So I think it's important to make sure that people cost stuff out. I think it's important that any government should be held account to their record. So these guys change their leader and they say, hey, we don't want to talk about our past 10 years.
10 years is over.
We don't want to talk about that record. We want to talk about new things. And so that's where I think all politicians need to be held to account, is what have they said they're going to do and what have they done in relation to what they said.
I totally agree with all that. And to even dissect it from like how I see things is I have a hard time trusting government. Anybody up there. I trust you because I know you personally, but I think that's something that I see often. And I do feel the same way about the Liberal Party, that they set up way more smoke screens than other parties. But I also say that being from a position where I didn't pay attention to politics 10 years ago. So I've been under Justin Trudeau since I've been paying attention more.
And that makes sense. I think that's always the challenge. People live their lives, and I think most people think, hey, I'll vote at election time. I'm going to trust them to have my best interests at heart.
Yeah.
That is not always the case.
No.
I think that's why we always need to ask questions of government. We always need to ask questions of our elected people at all levels, provincial, municipal, regional. We get one added bonus here in Niagara. We get an extra level of government that not every community has right across the country.
We're so fortunate.
Oh, aren't we lucky? We get to pay way more taxes that way. So I think it's our job when people make promises is to hold them to account and ask those questions.
I agree.
Look when our municipal taxes go up. For example, who pays attention to the municipal budget process? It's complicated.
Very.
No one does. I mean, that's the challenge. I mean, most people don't even know who their elected council man or woman is.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. People, we live busy lives. We have families. We're trying to get by. We're trying to put food on the table. Maybe we're taking our kids to sports or driving around. You don't have time to look at every piece of, and there's in Niagara 4 levels of government, not 3. So it's tough. And so I get
Very
why
tough.
people say, listen, I'm going to trust government. I'm going to trust this person to do what they say. And then we don't follow up to see if they actually follow through and anything they promised.
There's not a lot of accountability.
There's not enough. No. Absolutely.
And I've been thinking about that recently too. And there's no way to completely fix it. But at the federal level, I think even with the Conservatives in, I think that accountability is still hard because it's the way I see it. The federal government is the farthest away from the people at any level, right?
They represent all those big things like defense, security, taxation, all right? It seems like it's a million miles away, but it's very important what they do. Trade, all that stuff.
I just printed those things out. I think that's a good thing to touch on is what the federal government is actually. So I have the list here. I'm sure, I don't know. These are big things. Like I was trying to figure out, because you hear all these things in the media, but it's like, what are the actual responsibilities? Because there's a whole bunch of shit in there that I don't even know if it falls under responsibilities or not. I guess you can kind of put almost anything in there because you got like criminal law covers a
lot of stuff, right?
A ton of stuff.
But it doesn't cover the provincial stuff, whatever.
No, yeah.
But you got like defense, you got trade, you got foreign affairs, you got justice, you got taxation, CRA, revenue, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the list goes on and on of those big ticket items that require billions of dollars to deal with it. You think about, I always ask people about what they thought about getting their passport after COVID. And you think about that, people weren't traveling for a while, it was a couple of years, and people had 5-year passports all of a sudden realized, oh, my passport's expired, right? And they started trying to travel again, and the lineups were insane. You had to wait days and sometimes weeks to get a new passport. No one would think, so if you didn't travel, you wouldn't think about a passport. That's why we don't think about defense. We don't think about defense because we're assuming it's been taken care of. It's been managed by smarter people. People are taking care of our best interest.
Right.
But you see, that's why we need to hold people to account, is because if I don't have time to worry about defense, it's not my thing. But all of a sudden I'm in a business that manufactures stuff, and now we got tariffs. Tariffs are going to affect two groups of people. People that sell to the U.S. and trade with the U.S., export to the U.S., and those that don't. So the people that don't trade with the U.S. are going to say, hey, my life's fine. I talked to a construction guy, a window company,
right?
Big window company. You'd recognize the name of it. I mentioned I talked to one of the owners a couple of weeks ago, and I said, how are tariffs going to affect you? And he says, not really at all. Our market's all Canadian. Our supplies are Canadian. How many companies would you think you talk to in the course of a day? They actually have to get goods from the U.S. that we're now talking about counter tariffing. Yeah. So all of a sudden, what you thought was pretty clear, no, it won't affect us. All of a sudden, we're bringing goods and services in. Wow, what's that going to mean to the cost for you to do business or whoever they are? Right?
That has been the hottest topic.
It has been a hot topic for sure.
That one is wild, and even before the tariff stuff, because tariffs that's a whole wild battle, but. Something that I think that we were already talking about with accountability, and I know that there's mixed opinions about it, but I'm fine to share mine with what they've got going on with Doge, with Elon. I think it's fantastic. I don't know how you feel about it.
I think we should always be looking at our own set of books. We need to look. There's waste. I can assure you there's billions of dollars of waste. We've exposed a number of it through some of our committees, through public accounts, through ethics. We had this green slush fund, right? That was, giving money to insiders, to people that had conflicts of interest. I think it was almost 100 declared conflicts of interest when it came to funds given to themselves, basically.
Wow.
Think about that. You're responsible. We're going to put you on a board. You're responsible to responsibly hand out money, and you hand it out to yourself. That's not cool. That's not ethical, and that's not right. So there's always an opportunity. Yeah. I was a part of, this is slightly different, but also similar. I was a part of the Red Tape Reduction Round Committee a number of years ago when we were in government. Once again, going around the country, figuring out ways where we could reduce red tape. That's a similar thing. You can't tell me red tape, just like spending, you don't have to keep an eye on all the time. Because even if we fix it once and walk away from it, it's going to be there. Another government, another program. And that's why it's important to continue to look at government spending with a critical lens and figure out, is this something we need to spend on, or is it something that we can do without? Because we're operating crazy deficits. Remember, that was another thing that most people didn't even realize or didn't pay attention to, was that under Trudeau, he spent as much money as every other prime minister in the history of our country. We went from about $600 billion in debt to over $1.2 trillion. So he doubled the debt. So when you start paying interest on that, you've got to pay that interest. That means our kids are going to be paying that interest. Our kids' kids are going to be paying that interest. And we, in literally 2 or 3 years, in one term.
So what did it all get spent on?
See, once again, we haven't audited that stuff, right? Some of the stuff was necessary.
For sure.
But not all of it wasn't. So you can't tell me, okay, it was for COVID or whatever it was, but we won't audit the programs to make sure people got who were supposed to get that money. So and it doesn't matter if it's COVID, insert green tech, insert, foreign aid. Insert anything you want to do where there's lots of money and low accountability. There's always room for abuse.
Yeah, totally.
Doesn't mean that every program is going to have abuse, but you need to.
That's the recipe. Yeah,
absolutely. You need to look at that stuff. You need to have accountability, and you need to have a critical eye looking to make sure that stuff is done.
Yeah.
One of the coolest committees, I chaired this committee, was called Public Accounts.
Yeah.
And they've uncovered a lot of stuff. The public accounts is by definition the public accounts of Canada.
Right.
And we have an auditor general that will audit different departments, different ministries, different programs, and then say, do you have value for money? Mm-hmm. I think one of the coolest people on the Hill or in Ottawa is the auditor general. They got an amazing responsibility, and they go in there and they look at things. They can't look at everything all the time, but they do have a great role in being able to expose what's going on. And hey, if the ministry or the department or the program is doing well, they give it a thumbs up. There's nothing wrong with that. We like to see programs that are working well, but they got a great job. Once again, most people would not even know what an auditor general is.
But I've heard that term, but I didn't know that's what it was.
They do. They audit the program. So they could do anything from a minister's office, a program, or a department, any of those kinds of things, just to make sure the checks and balances. So they don't just audit the money. They make sure there's value as well. Is there checks and balances? And like, if you have a program that spends X, Y, is there a way to track that and make sure you're getting value for a really unique position, and one that a lot of developed countries have, and also a very important one for sure.
Very important. I would imagine that's actually, like, I love the sounds of it, but I imagine that's a very tough job, because the doors you're knocking on, to a lack of a better term, investigate, they must be worried when you come knocking.
Well, they should only worry if they're not doing their job, right?
Well,
but you're right. And I think, and the other, I think the way Parliament was set up was that the person that chairs that committee is always an opposition member.
Oh.
So that's also a great check and balance as well. Because if you had government people chairing the Public Accounts Committee, you might say, there's nothing to see here, folks. Let's walk away from here.
So who is it right now?
The chair his name's John Williamson, who is a Conservative member of Parliament from New Brunswick.
From New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then I chaired it a number of years ago, and I found it very fascinating. Of all the committees I've chaired, that to me was one of the most interesting ones, because you get a chance to see the mechanics of government, the machinery of government, right?
Totally. And see, like, to me, I value that more myself. I'm not even sure of all the platforms for different sides, but when I hear about cuts, I always get concerned, because a cut usually means that if you cut a tax, it means you're losing something with it, right? But to me, when you're doing internal cutting the fat, when you cut the fat, it's not needed. So it's like, I appreciate those things better than just saying, we're getting rid of the carbon tax, because I don't even know what the hell that was even for. But still, it means that there's a gain and loss. But you can actually make efficiencies through making those improvements by finding waste. So I like those things.
Yeah, no, and
myself.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes some sense, and that's why
some sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, because at the end of the day, just because governments change programs all the time. Mm-hmm. I could be the Minister of Industry and have a program today, and not even a new government comes in, but we decide that we're going to change up the program. It happens all the time. I remember when we were doing infrastructure, for example, and I would be looking for infrastructure for the community. I was getting money for, the town of Pelham or Grimsby or Beamsville, all those kinds of things. Maybe at one time the program would include arenas. And I always tell people that the cultural center of any small town is the arena, right? That's where most people will meet and gather, and their kids are there playing sports or doing hockey, figure skating, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's important. But that same program also provided, sidewalks for, places like Hayes Street in Pelham.
Right.
But that also provided wastewater for Grimsby, who was trying to build new homes. So a lot of infrastructure is required and needed. So you think that's great, but then the program may change, and all of a sudden we're not looking at funding arenas, but maybe we'll help fund a fire station. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
Those programs change over time, and so I always tell people, when governments have programs, just because what you're looking for, and I'm talking to mayors, specifically, if it's not working, then, there's always a chance that in a year or so that program may change up.
Right. So right. I was actually with Winkley Mayor today, Brian Grant. I was with him. Yeah, a good friend of mine. Yeah, very interesting. This is, as far as politics goes, between what just the changeover in the United States and now this going on here. Yeah, like you said, it's a lot.
Lots going on right now. And I think that we're at a place in the history of our country where we've got two choices to make, more of the same. I think they've been terrible policies. I've seen, our GDP per capita, which means how successful is the country as a whole, is one of the worst now over the last 10 years. We're looking at some of the worst growth over the next, 10, 20, 30 years into 2060.
I've seen those charts.
They're scary.
I wasn't sure if they were real or
not.
They're
absolutely scary. And the challenge is that, do we want more of the same, or do we want more of how do we fix our country, make it more entrepreneurial, make sure that we can be more self-sufficient? People always say, let's talk about tariffs and stuff. I said, well, let's talk about the last 10 years and all the money that we missed out on in terms of investment in our country. We've got great natural resources. We actually extract our resources more environmentally responsibly than any other country in the world.
Wow!
And we look at things like LNG, liquefied natural gas. That number of countries have actually come to us and said, we could really use some LNG because we need your energy. And our prime minister said, there's not a case. You realize we had 9 countries, Japan and South Korea and Greece and all these countries, a couple in Europe, that said we really could use your LNG. And the former prime minister said there was not a business case. What do you mean there's not a business case?
I heard that. That did happen.
It did happen. And we need to get pipelines built because, quite frankly, that is the way we can get our products to market. I think
we have a lot here, right?
We got tons. We got, one of the largest,
more than we need.
One of the largest oil and gas reserves in the world. I think it's 2 or 3 in the world. But the reality is that, we sell our product to the US at a 30% discount. So think about that for a second. If we are selling oil and say it's, 60 or 70, let's say it's $60 a barrel. It's right now, I think it's around 70 or 68 or 69. And it'll probably be different by the time the podcast comes out. But just say it was at $60 a barrel. 30% discount on that.
Why do we do that?
Because we only have one customer. It's the U.S. We don't have pipelines to get it to the coast. And so we've had all these terrible policies over the last 10 years that has not given us the ability to diversify what we're trying to do, right? We got to diversify. And so part of the challenge with these tariffs is now we heavily relied on the U.S. for trade. And it makes sense because up until this last election, they were a great trading partner. We could count on them. They were reliable. Now we just, every week or every month, we have no idea what's going to happen next. And so they become unreliable as a trading partner. And so when someone like Trump says, well, we're being ripped off, the response should be, no, as a matter of fact, you got a good deal from us because you pay less for our product because we're landlocked,
right?
That goes. And what we need to do is diversify. We need to build pipelines. We need to make sure we look at infrastructure so we can get our product to market. Now, if we are building pipelines and we're helping extract oil and gas and getting that to the coast, both coasts, then Canadian manufacturing benefits from that. They have a chance. So, Ontario manufacturing, one of the larger manufacturing provinces, obviously for proximity to the U.S. and all those other kinds of things.
Right.
They would benefit from that as well. It would make a huge difference. So when we talk about why we're in this situation, people don't want to look at the past. It's not just it showed up on the radar screen. We've been lazy. We haven't been doing our work. We haven't been getting pipelines. But one of the things that during this campaign, Pierre talked about building a national energy corridor. So making sure that we could actually get our oil and gas to market and hydro and all these things.
Interesting.
It's like a national project. And I think why that makes sense is that if we don't do that, we're going to continue to be reliant on the U.S. for a number of things. And that's not going to be possible. A lot of people can't just pivot to Europe. If we look at our amount of trade with France, I think it's somewhere around the neighborhood of 9 or 10 billion. Our trade with the U.S. is 900 billion, almost $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So when you look at stuff like that,
Yeah.
you've got an economy that's doing almost 100 times more next door. It's not feasible just to say, okay, we'll just sell more product to UK. And
No.
yeah, if we could, we would.
Yeah.
And people are always trying to find new markets. That never stops. But what we have to do and what we need to figure out is how, as a country, we can be more self-reliant. I think that's one of the first steps.
Definitely. You just said a lot of good stuff. And I'm trying to think, the pipeline is something that I think I even remember being in grade school and hearing about that. And I don't even know, like, our reserves are mostly in the West, right? Alberta
and Saskatchewan for the most part. Yeah.
That's like the majority.
Yeah. There's some shale gas and stuff on the East Coast, but they don't try and get it out of the ground at all. Oh. So for the most part, our energy is coming from Saskatchewan and from Alberta.
So that is oil
and natural gas. Yeah.
Which we do have around here, but it maybe more out there. So there is a current pipeline. Like, do you know where it starts from there? Does it come to here? I don't even know how it gets transported.
Enbridge has got pipelines running through Niagara, right?
Right.
You can just,
yeah.
If I go down my street, I'm hooked up to Enbridge. They've got natural gas that I can get to my house. And, part of that is pipelines that they've had for years. They've been safe and effective, all that stuff. Let me give you another stat that I think will blow you away.
Yeah.
China, which is the greatest emitter. All right. So if we shut down our whole industry right now, our emissions are anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5%. Our emissions.
Right.
If we shut down everything, we probably wouldn't even get to like 1%, or maybe we'd drop it to 0.8 or 0.7%. China produces over 30 to 35% of the world emissions.
Wow.
They have more emissions than every other country in the world for the most part. And as they're growing, they're adding 1 to 2 coal-fired plants a week. So you think about us shutting down every energy, every plant, every type of development we have, we still couldn't come close. Conversely, if we were to get them LNG, liquefied natural gas, which is a cleaner gas,
right,
and it would reduce emissions, it would get them off of coal. If we could get that to China, we could actually help bring down emissions.
Amazing.
So, but we don't talk about this because the mainstream media are insane. They don't want to talk about facts. These are facts.
Yeah.
You want to reduce emissions, you help one of the biggest emitters in the world. This is why a carbon tax doesn't make sense when we're trading with the U.S.
We're going to there.
What's that?
The carbon tax, because I don't understand.
Because it doesn't do anything. All it does is it's wealth redistribution. We pay money and they send that money to other countries. Do you realize that the Liberal government spent over $5.3 billion to send climate finance to the Philippines? The Philippines has less emissions than us.
Why?
Exactly. So you're telling me we can't reduce waste?
I know.
It's insane.
That's what.
So that's my whole point. My whole point is that what a carbon tax does is it just collects money for government's pet projects to redistribute wealth amongst Canadians and around the world. So the real goal of carbon tax is to punish you so much so that you can't go anywhere or do anything. You can't afford it.
Right.
So you think of a single mother, you think about a young family with kids trying to go to hockey. Listen, we live in the country. You and I both live, our riding's a lot rural.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of public transit. So everywhere you go, you need a car. To go to school, to go to work, to go to the store, everything.
Yeah.
So that disproportionately punishes people that need to know. We can't do public transit. If you or I go into Toronto, more than likely we'll go down, we'll get on the GO train in Burlington, right? Or something like that, and we'll get there. But we've got to drive to get to the GO train.
Got to drive there for sure.
So that's a challenge. I don't think people understand that. So that's another example of waste that could be dealt with in a way. So what I find interesting is that we continue to hammer that because we really believe that's something that people would actually put more money back in the pocket.
Those are good points. I'm trying to digest all of this stuff. Like I like that solution of trying to help them out with what we have to help reduce them versus because we don't create a ton.
We don't. We just don't.
What is it even called? It's not called pollution, or is it called pollution?
It's called emissions.
Emissions.
Right. So the reality is that when the mainstream media and the radical climate extremists are saying we need to shut down everything, they're not looking at the fact that LNG would help countries in Europe. LNG would help places like Japan. Japan came to us. They were one of the countries on that list and said, we'd like to buy some of your LNG. And we said, well, there's no case. That's what Trudeau said. There's no case for it. No, there's no business case. One of the first things Japan did with the U.S. was negotiate with the U.S. to invest almost $1 trillion. That's not $1 billion. That's not $100 billion. $1 trillion in the U.S. for LNG to be able to get that back to Japan. Think about that for a second.
That would have been nice.
Wouldn't that have been good? So, when we look at the last decade of lost investments, lost opportunities, a declining, per capita basis, which just means we're going to be poorer overall, the doubling cost of mortgages, the doubling cost of housing, all these things add up to the fact that there's a lot of disgruntled is a word, but I think also disillusioned and sort of like maybe sort of hopeless people thinking I'm never going to own a home. I'm going to be stuck in my parents' basement. I'm not going to be able to afford even we used to be able to pay off your house in 25 years. Now it takes 25 years to save for a down payment, right?
Right.
And you know that you're in the real estate business.
Yeah,
it's got to be tough when you're getting into a new home. And some of these homes now in markets are like $1 million which was never the case, years ago.
It's definitely, while home ownership is definitely difficult, it's still possible, but I definitely agree that a lot of the pressures from that, I don't even know pressures, but the problems have been caused by the government. Because like you said, when the government gets more involved is usually when things don't go well.
Yeah.
So when they're in there splashing around, it doesn't help. The free market corrects a lot of things.
Well, and I think we talked just before we went on here, housing plan. So the housing plan for us is to remove the tax, the HST portion, for someone buying a new home. So up to $1.3 million. So it's about $65,000, which would maybe be about $3,000 in total for a mortgage payment. Part of that. Not $3,000 a month, $3,000 in total. In terms of saving that, and also encouraging the provinces to drop the PST part, which would be huge, right? So $1 million. HST is like 130,000. We look at development fees, almost 50 grand. You think about that.
Development fees are fucking crazy.
They're nuts. They're insane. And so if you look at 120,000. We're doing 13%. So $130,000 on $1 million, and then you add a 50,000, and it could be 40 to 80. It could be, depending where you're living, what market. So let's just put 50 on top of the 30, $180,000 for taxes. That's cuckoo. And years ago, development fees were not even close.
No.
And that's why we got to get we got to get municipalities involved, because a lot of these municipalities are just doing whatever they want. And you go to some place and they're raising development fees, others are trying to manage it. They say, well, we need the services and all this. Like, they're spending more money as well. They got to learn to rein in their spending as well.
Totally.
I talked to someone the other day that lives in Beamsville on the lake, and they just built a house, and their taxes are like $20,000. Like, it's insane. And they get there's no water, there's no sewer, they got septic, they got a cistern.
Yeah.
There's no services from the town. The towns are out of control when it comes to what there are some municipalities trying to do a good job, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah, nice.
But there's a lot that are really
development charges are so out of control. Taxes
it makes it tough.
Crazy.
That's part of it, right? That's why we're not in the development business. So our thing is, let's give money to people to help them with a new house, or help with that house up to $1.3 million. The government plan, or the current government, the Liberal plan, is to say, we'll build housing ourselves. Like, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, please don't.
Just don't do it, because they had this accelerator fund where they gave hundreds of millions of dollars to the municipalities. They gave like almost 400 million, 500 million to Toronto as part of this accelerator fund. And all it did was raise the price of taxes on people's homes. It didn't build any homes, right? Because this is the problem. Government is not the solution. We gotta give people, we gotta give entrepreneurs, we gotta give individuals the ability to actually,
do what they're good at.
And what they're inspired about, and what causes them to get up in the morning and be excited.
Yeah.
And I think if we could do that and leave government out of it, government has a role, because they got to make sure that safety and there's definitely a role for them. But just when they overregulate and they make it difficult, then
I agree.
That's what slows down the economy. It's one of the things.
I very much agree. I think that government, that's why the only thing I did for this was trying to understand the responsibilities of the federal government. I did provincial as well. But there is definitely, without a doubt, an importance to have government.
Absolutely.
But it bloats out as time goes on.
Because they get overreached. They start doing stuff that's not their area of responsibility.
That happens.
They can't help themselves.
Yeah.
They keep building their bureaucracy so they go past their mandate. And that's the challenge. We realize as a federal government, we don't build the homes. That's a municipal, probably provincial as well in terms of zoning, et cetera, et cetera. But we can incent them by saying, if you do a good job and build more homes, we will give you more money.
Yes.
If you don't, we're going to take the money we're going to give you and give it to your neighbor, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Because we know all the time, people are like, oh, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, right? It's like, you can build a house, you can build this, but just don't do it in my neighborhood, right? So they've got to figure that out. We realize that's not our jurisdiction. The Liberals want to say, well, we'll just do it ourselves and build it. It's like they've never built anything on time. They've never built anything. Like they've had 10 years, they haven't built one home. Yeah. So that's the challenge.
I don't want the government building, even if it was conservative. I wouldn't want them. That's not what you guys are good at.
We need to set the conditions. We need to set the climate in ways that encourages private enterprise to do their thing.
Exactly. That's the thing that I worry about with government. And I think one of the reasons for sure that I align with you is less government is better, because that's how I start to determine how much I trust the government, because I think that the goal of a lot of governments, I just want to keep it open that way, is to have dependency on them.
Control, independency, yes.
Control, because if once they have that, then they
want you to be dependent on them, right?
Yeah.
We keep giving you a check versus encouraging you. Like an example is, there's lots of supports out there, and sometimes people need them. Mm-hmm. But when they go to work and earn a few extra bucks, what do? We tax it all back. Then it makes we don't encourage an incentive. We got to work in a place where people who are able to get a hand up and help themselves. Yeah. We can't just punish them all the time. We got to make it easier for them to.
And it's not easy. That's why it's not easy, because to me, we just said that, and then the next thing is, I don't think you just help people by giving them some money, even though the federal government's there. You educate people so that they can earn their own money or save or whatever. Education to me is so valuable.
Listen, we've already got government supports in place, right? We've got a CPP program, right? Mm-hmm. Canadian Pension Plan. I'm sorry, all the acronyms.
Yeah,
we've got Old Age Security, OAS. We've got GIS, Guaranteed Income Supplement. There's a number of these programs. One of the things that we've proposed during this campaign is to raise the basic personal exemption and seniors from $24,000 to $34,000. Well, that's a great idea, right? Because they can make more money and keep more and not pay taxes. And so it's things like that where we encourage people not to stop working, but to, if they are able to make more. That's the same with the capital gains. Great program we talked about. It says if you are investing your capital gains into a new project, that's one of the things that Pierre just mentioned last week. We're going to suggest that you won't pay tax on that if you're reinvesting in a Canadian company. Think about that. Think about what a builder,
that's great.
A builder that sells a bunch of stuff and says got this money. So let's say that the build. I'm using simple numbers so people understand. Yeah. You make $100,000, and let's use it. It would not be 50% tax, but for the sake of what we're talking about, say they're taxed at 50%. So they make $100,000, they get $50,000 that to invest in the next project. Well, what we're saying is you invest that $100,000 and you continue to grow that. At the end of the day, you're still going to be responsible for that taxation. But always the challenge when people do well or make money or able to actually help is that we tax them. We take it all away, and then it's tough for people to raise money to do the next project. So I think this is a brilliant plan. Yeah, and it's going to it's going to help everybody, help individuals. It helps small and medium-sized enterprises. It'll make a huge difference.
I think so. I'm pretty sure I've heard of, when I talk to some American entrepreneurs, that there's incentives like that over there, because I know that in the States that they have a lot of programs like that where they encourage.
Well, you could write off your house, the interest, right? Their mortgages, they lock you in for 30 years at the interest rate, and you can actually break the mortgage to get a lower mortgage rate without the penalties. I mean, this is the challenge. I mean, big banks are not your friends. just like big telcos are not. I mean, some of the worst service I've ever had in my life is from places like Bell.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
like the TD Bank. Like, let's call them out. These guys, some of these guys are horrible at the way they do it. And so at the end of the day, if we had more competition up here, that would also make a difference as well. But you think about our mortgage system versus the US. Okay, so let's just say we're not going to be able to write off our interest. That's a decision. That's a government decision.
Right.
But, if we break a mortgage early, we can't lock it in for long. Right? We bear all the risk. The banks are, getting off scot-free.
They do have
and
it
just
easy
like
that way.
they're arrogant and they're bloated. Like Bell is like one of the worst service providers I've ever seen in my life.
I don't use them.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
And the way they treat their customer, because they're arrogant.
Is that a government?
No, but they're a government. They're an oligopoly.
Yeah.
There's just a few of them, and we need more competition.
Yeah, competition
because they act like they're a monopoly. You got Rogers, you got Bell, you got TELUS. Those are the three big ones.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge at the end of the day. When they do bad stuff, or they're not competitive, or they're not responsive. Well, what are you going to do? You only got a couple other choices, right?
The options are super limited.
Absolutely.
So something that I don't think we've ever talked about this one, which it's on here, is national defense. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what things I don't understand, and this is why we give so much money to other countries. I don't understand. I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but I don't understand.
Well, a great example. I just told you about the Philippines.
Yeah,
that's $5 billion. But there are other examples as well. I think one of the challenges is that we've done a poor job with our military for so long in terms of investing. The NATO requirement is 2%, and I don't know, whatever 1.3 or whatever the number is. The U.S. has asked us to step up our investment, right? The U.S. has accused us and said, you're not doing your job. You're just assuming we're going to step in and protect you. Mm-hmm. I love to talk about fentanyl and Sam Cooper and meth labs in places like BC and money laundering. There's a great book, Sam Cooper. You need to read it. I'm getting off track here.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But the challenge is, what we have going on is that we haven't been stepping up to do our part. So the U.S. is saying, why aren't you?
What is NATO? Help me understand that a little bit. NATO is
North American Treaty Organization. So it's a North American. It's not. Sorry, that's NORAD. What we're looking NATO are NATO countries that were set up after the Cold War to help protect. It's like places like U.S. and Europe and none of those other ones. So that's part of it.
But we send them money.
We do. We don't send them. We spend the money ourselves on our own defense. And they look at it and say, okay, you're only spending 1.3. The target's 2%. You need to do your part. There are some cases where we're writing checks, but mostly when it comes to NATO, we're spending the money on our own military.
I got you.
And there's a list of things that qualify as defense spending.
Gotcha.
Right? So if I'm buying a jet or I'm buying an icebreaker to defend the North, or I'm spending money on troops and training, all those things would qualify.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I didn't know how that worked. So that's what it is. It's just about investing that into our own system, not so much giving them money so they can decide.
Correct. It's playing our part as part of a larger organization.
Gotcha.
We're doing our part. So if the U.S. is spending 8% or 10%, whatever that number is, and we're spending 1%, they're saying like, dude, why aren't you guys doing your part? You need to be doing more.
And who all belongs to that?
We could Google the list, but I mean, literally, it's like it's America and it's Canada, a number of European countries.
Gotcha.
Right.
It's not just like it's Canada, United States, Mexico. It's international. Well,
it's international. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting. And then like I asked that too. Like you said, that those billions of dollars sent to the Philippines and stuff. I always struggle when I hear about money going to other countries when it would do good here. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for it. It's that I don't understand. Because when we send, what was that number to the Philippines?
5.3 billion.
5.3 billion.
For climate action.
So when I hear that, before I start thinking waste or corruption, I think, why are we doing this? Because if we're sending them 5.3 billion, but they're a huge trade partner with us and we have a lot of things going on and we make that back in other ways, I can understand that. But if it's for something that makes no sense
Well,
and
where's
it's
the
just money
accountability?
laundering,
Where's the accountability, right?
right?
So and so I think, and that's why you need to look at all your programs all the time.
Yeah.
Right? You got to ask these questions. You got to be prepared to say, okay, we're giving money to A, B, or C. Right? Is it warranted? In some cases, it may be justified, necessary. I think as a wealthy country, sometimes we will try and help people build capacity in certain things if it lines up with what we're doing. Like,
right.
It may make sense. And that's why we need to look at every situation, not just say, here's a blank check.
Yeah,
Whoever asks, we'll give money to. And I think that, when we look at things like that, it also boils down to how we balance our books at home too, right? Like that's the challenge. Is this government originally 10 years ago, back in 2015, said, "Hey, we're going to only spend tiny deficits, 10 billion." We just had a financial update that we're not even talking about anymore, where they blew the numbers out of it was $50 or $60 billion dollars. It was insane. So that's the challenge.
Yeah.
If people, their eyes gloss over and they think,
that's the stuff that I care about the most is the money. That's
right.
what I care about.
Well, that's the problem, is that people in general, Canadians, they have a hard time reconciling. The numbers are too big. They're not upset. They're not frustrated. That was, we got elected in 2015, when we had the election in 2015, we just balanced the budget in 11 into 15. That was part of the thing. One of the things we did. The other party said, we don't need to balance the budget. We're going to spend tiny deficits. And we kind of made fun of them and said, it's not going to be tiny. You're going to spend way more. And even the NDP at that time, under Thomas Mulcair, said, you know what? We need to also live, we should also balance the budget. They didn't like that. The NDP didn't like that. And,
really?
And that was maybe, I'm not saying it's the only reason he got bounced, but, it was one of the reasons that they said, okay, whatever. But what happened was the $10 billion, which if that was only the case and only for a few years, if we look back at it now, that would have been pretty good, right? That would have been pretty amazing. But we said it's not going to happen. You guys are going to spend way more. And so that's the problem is that when you spend way more, like I said, we went from about $600 billion to over 1.2 trillion. We just doubled our interest payments. That's insane. And when interest rates go high, that's money for hospitals. That's money for our defense. That's money for our future.
Yeah.
Right?
For law, currency and banking, immigration, all these things.
Yes.
And then spills down. It's so crazy.
And then when and also when we're not living within our means, you talk about currency. That's also currency and inflation, right?
Oh.
If inflation is a tax. Right, we spend too much money. We spend, inflation definition is spending too much money for far too few goods. So once again, Pierre always had a great example. So you have 10 apples you want to buy, right, and you're spending $10 billion, right? But if you only have 10 apples and you're spending $20 billion, all of a sudden you put the price of stuff up because they're competing for the same amount of goods.
Totally.
So anyways, that's another time, another lesson, because that's a little bit lengthy. So that's the challenge when we start. So that, that's one case. So if inflation's terrible and interest is, the bank, once again, we're not going to get in the Bank of Canada interest rate stuff, but then currency's a problem too. Our currency's getting killed right now.
Totally killed.
I think it was I saw it today, it was 69 cents. I mean,
it's the lowest it's been
in a long, 20 years or
long time.
So,
I don't remember.
So the challenge is we're buying goods from the U.S.
Yeah.
We're now going to tariff from 25%. We're already, at almost a 50-cent dollar if you're buying it the other way. It's 45, 46. The bank puts their little service charge on, TD Bank, once again. And then what ends up happening is that you're paying $1.50 for a dollar and you've got tariffs. Life becomes more expensive. It's a vicious circle.
It's crazy. Back again to that money getting sent to Philippines. How does that even work? What's the process of how there's the money sitting wherever and it gets to go there? It's not like Justin he just clicks a button on the computer, right? Does it go through any type of discussion?
Well, no, we didn't discuss it at all. That was just something the government arbitrarily
They could just do that.
Yeah, they're the government. They just sent the money out, right?
They just have free will.
Yeah.
So
now we'll have a budget, right? We'll have the budget we vote on. which we vote against, that'll include stuff like that in it.
Right.
But if you're the government, you got the votes, you get to vote for it.
And you can just do it.
Yeah.
There's no, because they're in a majority. Is that
Correct.
why?
Well, they're not in a majority, but effectively they've been a majority because the NDP has been propping them up.
Yeah. And just going along with
Correct.
what they had to do.
So normally you get a minority government and people say, okay, it usually lasts around 2 years. It could be 18 months, it could be 2.5 years. Average is around 2 years, maybe even slightly less. So people do that subconsciously. We're voting you guys, but we don't totally trust you guys. Yeah. So we're not giving you full mandate. And then these guys, acted and operated like they had a full-blown majority because they had the NDP there to prop them up all the time. I think that's one of the reasons they're getting killed in the polls right now. These guys are getting destroyed because I think they had a chance to take them out, and they didn't do it. And they're they're in single digits right now.
That's so crazy.
Single digits.
How many seats do they have?
They have 25 right now, and they're projecting to end up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 seats.
That's so crazy.
Official party status, I think you need 12 seats. They're going to lose official party status today. That may change. Campaign's another 4 weeks.
So what happens if they lose that official status? What's his?
They lose resources from the House. They don't have many questions in question period. They sort of they're given a timeout.
So, interesting.
Yeah. If Jack Mead had taken them out in this, before December and had done, he probably would have been in better shape. He's effectively destroyed his own party.
Yeah.
That's why he's a terrible leader.
Yeah,
terrible and arrogant. Terrible.
I hear that same thing from everybody, not just conservatives.
It's brutal.
From everybody. I don't hear anybody propping him up at all.
No.
And one of the best job of reporting that I've seen in a while was months ago now, but it was a reporter discussing with him, asking him if he's going to call the election or not. And she kept pressing on him and he kept saying, there will be an election. And she's like, fourth grader knows.
This was Jag Mead?
Yeah.
No, so whether he was going to support or take down?
Yeah. And this was months ago. And she was trying to say, what are you waiting for?
I know.
And he kept saying, there's going to be election. And she's like, every fourth grader knows there's going to be an election. When are you going to call it?
Right. When are you going to support it? Because every party in the House was prepared to do that. Except, it was us as the official opposition, the Bloc, and then it was just the NDP.
So official opposition means the next party with the most seats.
Absolutely. The next party, government in waiting, whatever you want to say. The official opposition is the next party with the second most seats.
Okay, now I've got something that I want to direct to that I don't understand. Is how did Carney become our prime minister?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people shaking their head. No, I
don't understand the process even.
So
hold on. Even before you go, let me from me what I see. Okay, yeah. Trudeau says I'm going to step down when we find somebody to replace me, and then I believe I seen a Liberal debate on TV, which I believe was, I don't know if it was Freeland, whoever, I don't even remember. And what I thought was they were debating and the winner would become the next leader. I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what I was seeing. So
they have a leadership race. So you have to take out a membership. All parties charge $10 for a membership, something nominal to show you're committed.
Right.
The Liberals said no, we won't. They haven't charged for memberships, so anyone can join the party. No one's vetted in terms because this is where foreign interference comes into effect. They sold how many memberships did they sell? Like 300,000, 400,000, whatever the number was. Mm-hmm. Then they disqualified 2/3 of them. So it was only 150,000 people that voted. It's crazy. And then all of a sudden,
and this is normal people. This is Canadian.
Well, supposedly we don't know. I don't know. They're supposed to be Canadian citizens. They're supposed to be over 14 years of age. There's a criteria.
Across Canada,
correct?
But not just in Ottawa, not Ontario.
But they across the country. But they disqualified 2/3 of the membership. So what's going on there? And then he ended up with literally 85% of the vote, the same vote in every single riding, which makes you scratch your head and go,
did that happen?
What's going on?
That happened?
Not even Krista Freeland did that well in her own riding. You'd think she'd do better than the average, right?
Yeah.
So that's just crazy. So, and by able to, prorogue the House and all this kind of stuff, that gave them a chance to set it up this way. So let's think about this guy. This guy has not been in the country for 12 years.
Yeah. I don't even know.
Okay, 12 years. He hasn't been in the country 12 years. He has not been in the country most of his adult life. Think about this. Grew up, smart guy, ended up going to, Harvard and Oxford, wherever the states, worked around the world, New York, whatever, London, all that kind of stuff. So most of his adult life he hasn't been in Canada. Mm-hmm. He holds passports in 3 countries.
Interesting.
3. He's a citizen of 3 countries. So how does anyone think this guy has actually got the best interests of Canadians at heart? Think about it. He hasn't lived here for 12 years. He has the citizenship of 3 countries.
And what was his involvement with the party before? Like how does he
the last 5 years he's been an economic advisor to Trudeau. So he's been advising these guys on some of these things.
Okay, so help me understand just the process even. So I didn't know that somebody could become prime minister that wasn't an MP. I thought you had to be MP or
you got to be an MP to sit in the House, and you obviously you need to have a seat in order to be able to be there and answer questions in the House.
Right.
So he needs to get a seat in the House. There's no question about that. But anyone could be the leader. Usually
anybody.
Yeah, anyone that runs and can sell enough memberships and get people out. So we got a question with the process that we kind of wonder about that. They disqualified 2 people because of foreign interference, they claim. So, this is like, you kind of wonder what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? So all those questions, should cause people to pause and say, is this the best guy you could find? Hasn't been in the country for like the last decade plus. He hasn't been in Canada for most of his adult life.
I don't think he's the best for our country at all.
No, not even close.
When I see it, what I see is that the Liberals put him in because they thought it gave him the best chance of winning. However that is, not because he's the best candidate or anything, because I don't believe, like I said, that they have my best interest first. I can't when all they're showing is they care about the party more.
Correct.
So when I see it, I don't think he is. But I'm just trying to even understand how the fuck it happened. Because I don't get how I've never heard of this guy. And then one day I wake up and he's our prime minister. I didn't even know it was possible. That's what I mean.
Yeah, no, it's quite the magic act there, right? So.
It was because I a few months ago, talking to liberal friends in Toronto that have always been liberal. I don't know if they'll ever change from liberal. That's their environment, right? Yep. I get it. I have friends that are in Toronto that are liberals and we get along great. It's just we're products of our environments, right? And they were talking to me about how much they were, what's the right word? They were just not liberal. They were not feeling liberal anymore. They were upset with Justin, the party, and everything. And I'm like, this is amazing. But then all these smoke and mirrors over the last couple months, and they're starting to drink the Kool-Aid again. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
Like, how can these things all of a sudden change your mind?
So the challenge is it's like the, shiny object, right?
Yeah.
The new guy. But look at his record. So I just talked about what he has done in terms of where he's lived and passports he holds. Let's talk about his company, Brookfield, that he was the chairman of.
Okay.
6 days after Trump announced tariffs, at Brookfield, he moved the head office from Toronto to New York City.
That's true. See, I've seen that. I don't know if that's true or not.
It is true. It's absolutely true. 100% true. And what bothers me is that you're vying for the top Canadian job, where we want the jobs, we want the money to stay, we want the taxes to stay here.
Yeah.
And you're doing what's best for that's what business people do all the time. That's not what a leader, that's not what the prime minister does.
Yeah.
Prime minister does what's best for the country.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, there are tons and tons of tax evasion going on because they've set up companies in places like Bermuda to avoid taxes. Once again, I don't know if you'd remember, a number of years ago, maybe not, there was this thing called the Panama Papers. Google later. Google later.
Yeah.
It was where basically the same thing was happening. People were investing in companies, with their tax planners that was taking all their money offshore to avoid paying taxes in the country. Mm-hmm. So think about that. He's got a company where he has moved money, billions, not like $100,000 or $1 million,
big money,
billions of dollars offshore to avoid paying taxes. And this is the dude we want running our country. Come on.
No.
Is this the best they can get? A guy that hasn't lived in the country for over a decade, the guy that's got 3 passports. So where is his allegiance to? And this guy that spends all his time trying to avoid paying taxes while he encourages you and I to pay more taxes.
Yeah, pay more. I know.
We call that a hypocrite.
That's what I find. And like, I'm not even surprised by him. That I find that more from that party than any other.
It's unbelievable. And so for anyone to think, oh, this guy's a great leader, it's like, have you not asked one question about what this guy's been doing the last decade?
See, like, I haven't spent a lot of time looking into him because to me, it doesn't really matter because I don't believe any of it because everything that's happening right now to me is, like I said, they're doing it for the party, not from Canada. I haven't seen them do stuff where it seems like they're doing for the country first. So I personally haven't spent a lot of time looking into him because
you're not going to support him anyway, so it doesn't matter.
So like you
but
can't.
You see, this is what people need to be looking at because the people, your same friends, or people that said, hey, Trudeau bad, Carney good.
Yeah,
they haven't looked into the fact this guy is going to have some of the same disastrous policies that they were already had in place. And he's not going to be any better for the country than the last guy. And that's the problem. They're going to wake up after the election if things were to happen that way. We're going to make sure they don't. But basically they haven't done their due diligence on this guy. And that's the problem.
See, and like I said, things I haven't looked at, which I find interesting, that I've seen 2 opposites comment on where he's been in whatever positions. And I've heard sides say that he did such an amazing job. I don't know if it was in England or some shit. I don't even know. And then I see others that he almost tanked that economy. And I don't even look into what's true or not because it doesn't even really matter. But it's interesting, like I was talking about, finding the truths are so hard. Yeah. And that's why like I appreciate when you tell me things because I know that you wouldn't spew things that aren't.
But I'm also going to tell you, I'm going to give you my bias up front. I'm going to tell you I believe in smaller government.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you what my worldview is.
Yeah.
So you're going to understand that what I'm talking about is from a position of how I view the world should happen and what we should be focused on, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we lose the context, right? So if a liberal who's trying to stay in government says Mark Carney's the best guy, it's because they want to stay in government. So maybe for them, that's the reality.
That right? is. But
that's not the reality of what's best for Canada.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's so wild right now, Dean.
Yeah, lots going on.
It's so wild. I hope this is helping some people too, because like I said, the media is so confusing.
Well, it is. And like I said, I at a rally a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I was there.
And I saw, 4,500 people in Hamilton. I've never seen anything like that in my 25 years. And he went up to Surrey, BC, 5,500 people. He was out in, Winnipeg, 3,500 people. He was in Fredericton last night, I think 2,500 people. All record-breaking appearances for a political rally.
Interesting.
I heard from my colleague, and he said, Dean, we had Pierre out in Fredericton. We've never seen such a great turnout for a political event in all our years in New Brunswick. So, that's why I don't believe everything I see.
Totally.
And I look at, I hear what's on the ground, and I hear people, are very excited. People are showing up in masses to see and hear what he has to say because they want hope, right?
It's kind of similar what's happening here that just happened in the United States as far as Biden didn't step down, but he didn't rerun, right? And then
they pushed him out,
right?
They pushed him out just like they pushed out Trudeau,
right? It's that, and then Kamala came in, and it was the same thing. Like they did that with her, from my perspective, so that they had a better chance because
that's why
Biden's
but they didn't have a real race. They actually appointed her. Right. Without actually going through the process of letting the membership choose. And the Liberals pretended like they did the same thing.
So they did even worse. But then what was interesting too is I'm pretty sure leading up to the American election, they were showing the polls being super close and then Trump won by a landslide. And that's, I think, and I haven't even checked, but I heard the polls are
So I think you have to look at the bias in the pollsters.
Totally.
So you have to look at that stuff. I mean, I see polls where I know there's a liberal bias and they're skewed towards liberals. And then I go to a pollster I trust and we're in a race, right? So I think that And that's why I said you always got to look at you got to ask all the questions, right? You got to ask what's going on, who's doing it, who's behind it, what's the history of the company, how accurate have they been?
Yeah.
Google, best pollster, who'd had the best results in the last number of years. You look at their polls versus a new polling company that shows up that's never polled before, and you go, where's this person? And then you start digging into their ties and find out they got liberal ties, and then you go, okay. Then you got another pollster that is unabashedly liberal, like hugely liberal, and his polls are so cuckoo.
So what's the point of trying to skew the polls, trying to get people to join the herd?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
I think that's part of it.
Because I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, you don't got the votes by saying you're polling the right way, right? No. So the smokescreen is what I'm trying to think. And that's the only thing I could come up with is you're trying to create the herd mentality, or like somebody that wasn't sure now doesn't join the herd. Maybe they just don't vote. It goes back
to the smokescreens again, right?
Yeah.
People could talk about polls all day long. The only poll that matters is on election day, right?
Exactly.
But what I look at is I look at who's showing up, who's coming to me and asking me for signs and telling me, hey, Dean, you got to sign on my lawn. I want a bigger sign because I'm really proud. I want your name on there. I want the party on there. It's going to a rallies where I've never seen, almost 5,000 people at a rally in Hamilton, Stony Creek, before in my life. Those are the things I look at, is what are the enthusiasm on the ground. Mm-hmm. And so, there's going to be more. It's going to go back and forth over the course of the election, right? And then the media will have their spin. Social media will have their spin in terms of it. And, I think the challenge is people need to do their homework. You just said it. People got to find out. They got to look out for themselves. They got to understand the question. If the guy that had advised Justin Trudeau over the last 5 years and doesn't believe in any of these things, all of a sudden has a deathbed conversion experience and thinks it's not going to be long lived. Like a guy that's been supported carbon tax his whole life, a guy that's supported big government his whole life, the guy that's been involved in big technocracies. All these things you got to look at the record of where this person's come with and realize that what they're saying may not actually be true. It may actually be lies. That's what you have to look at. Pierre's been talking about a carbon tax for 2 years. He's been talking about giving people a chance to all the things he's been saying. He hasn't changed. He hasn't changed on.
See, and that's the thing. Like, the carbon tax has been around for 5 or 6 years. Right?
It's been around. It's been around for at least 19, or at least 5 years.
Somewhere around there, right? And then, today, I'm not exactly sure when this airs, but today, as of April 1st, the consumer part or whatever has now been lifted. And when I see that, I'm like, so you've been charging me at 6 years, and now it's 4 weeks away from the election, and you're taking it away? Yeah, I really believe that you've changed your 6 year mentality.
They have not removed it in legislation. It has not been removed. It's still there.
Oh,
they can't remove it. They can pause it, right?
Gotcha. Okay, pause.
But it's still on the books.
That's even better to know that it's paused, because when I see any drastic changes before an election, I don't buy it.
No,
I don't care who it's from.
The proof is what did you say before you got there?
Exactly,
because it's probably going to be what you demonstrate afterwards, right?
This is what bothers me too. Is I've talked to people and they're like, they've realized the carbon tax was bad.
No, they haven't.
And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, if they did, why didn't they do this?
Go back
a year ago.
You should go to Carney wrote a book a couple of years ago called Values. You should read the book.
I'm going to.
It is insane. This guy is he must be Frankenstein. He's like nothing like he talks about in the book. He said, basically, you're going to have to strand some assets. Gas-powered cars are going to be a thing of the past, and you're going to have to walk away. Some properties are not going to make sense. Like, this guy advocated for keeping oil and gas in the ground. So what's he talking about? Even if you listen to his weasel words now, he's talking about, a cap, not having a cap, like this and that, a pause. It's just weasel words.
That's funny you say that, because I know people that are not conservative that say the same thing.
It's actually true.
That word weasel too.
Yes.
And I haven't even seen him talk, I don't think, because I just don't really care.
Well, and he hasn't really said a lot. That's the whole thing. He's, the first 3 announcements we're doing all the three things we already said, like taking the carbon tax off a home, which is what we've been saying for like quite a while. Looking at reducing the capital gains tax that they didn't actually pass in the House. They just actually put it in. They never got a chance to pass it. Reversing that, which is what we were talking about. So you look at all these things. Like, the first thing, free things, we used to call him carbon tax Carney, and then we called him copycat Carney, and the last thing we're calling him was conflict of interest Carney. Right. So like, it's like, you love this carbon tax, but no, you don't. You've had this, miraculous deathbed conversion, and, you are copying our policies. Like, what's the originality of what is your actual platform? And the last thing is, like, doesn't even want to disclose what his assets are and where his money's coming from. And Brookfield's a company that encouraged and invested in companies around the world to build pipelines. They're a huge company, but he's the one that advocates that we don't build pipelines. Like, he's a hypocrite. That's horrible. And so people need to look at what he said through his book Values. I encourage people to pick it up and read it.
Yeah.
They need to listen to hear him clips from him talking before, and then you look at that and say what he's saying now. These two things don't add up. They're not even close.
So I want to boil it down to a little bit more basics because the election is soon, a few weeks away. And when people go to vote, they vote for their local MP. It's not like we vote for Pierre or for that guy, right? Because some people I've talked to, they're like, oh, I'm voting for Pierre. I'm like, do you live in Ottawa? Or like, sure, he's the leader, but you got to know who's your local representative, right?
Absolutely.
Like when I go to the ballot box, I see Dean.
Right.
I don't see Pierre on there.
Correct.
Right. That's I was trying to remember too. That's the only thing on the ballot, because sometimes when we go, I think municipal, there's more things.
There's no party affiliation. It's just a name.
Just a name.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. Because
and I tell people too, if they want to vote early, the returning office, electoral office, is in Beamsville, the old Beamsville High School. You can go in any time.
Oh, yeah?
And you can write my name in, Dean Allison. You write it in if you want to vote early. And I vote early just because I can avoid the crowds on election day. And it's a great way to do it. And then at some point, the cutoff for candidates will be next Monday night. So after that, they'll know what candidates, and then they'll make the ballot up. And so then if you went into do an advanced poll before that,
right?
Like, you go in, or they're going to make the ballots up at some point in time. But until the ballots are made up, which is almost going to be, it's going to take a couple more weeks. You could actually go in and write my name in. You don't write Pierre, you don't write Conservative, you write Dean Allison, because if you write anything else, it'll actually be a spoiled ballot.
What happens if I spell your name wrong?
I think it's two L's in Allison. I think for the most part, they
can decipher who you're voting
I think for the most part, like it would have to be a grotesque. If you want to call me Dino, that may not work.
Yeah, I wouldn't want anybody to spoil it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
So good news is that my name is easy to spell.
Yes, right? It is. So, it is. It definitely is.
DeanAllison. Like it's a very easy name to spell. So
so that's at old Beamsville High School is where people can vote now.
Yep. 9 to 9 Monday to Friday, 9 to 6 on Saturday, and 12 to 4 on Sundays. It's got great hours. You think about 9 to 9. I mean, wow, great hours Monday to Friday, right? So,
I want to go out and vote, and then. The options become...
There'll be advanced polls. They'll be over Easter weekend.
Okay.
Right? So it'll be like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the week before the election.
And then...
Election day is April 28th.
And Monday, that's the last day to vote.
That'll be the last day to vote.
And then results come in for the most part. It seems like that part's getting more efficient.
Yeah.
Results.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty good. It's always usually pretty good. Well, people they still do them old school, count the votes by hand.
Yeah.
And all the polls, it'll be over 200 polls in the riding. And then with those polls, they'll all call those results back into
200.
Over 200 polls, yeah.
Hold on. Isn't there 343 seats?
No, I'm just saying in our electoral district, so Niagara West.
Oh, okay.
Polling stations.
Gotcha.
There will be over 200. I think it's like 220 or something.
Gotcha.
It doesn't matter. There's a bunch of them.
There's that many. Wow.
Yeah, and so we got a new part of the riding. We're taking over. That's why I don't remember all the new poles, because I haven't seen them yet for the new part of the riding, which is St. Catharines over on 4th Ave. You got the Walmart, you got Ridley Plaza, you got Best Buy, you got the hospital, you got so all that area, and it goes from the 406 to the river and runs the river all the way up. So Power Glen area, it's a beautiful part of St. Catharines, and we take that over for the first time this election.
So the boundaries have changed.
Just added. We've added more. All the boundaries still remain the same. Grimsby, Lincoln, West Lincoln, Waynfleet, Pelham, a western part of St. Catharines, and we're going to add more western part of St. Catharines again this time.
So does that change based on population? Or
Yeah. I mean, some of the ridings were getting too big. They need to reorganize them. Like the riding in Niagara Falls included Niagara on the Lake and Fort Erie. It was one of the largest in the area. So they're actually reducing that to just Niagara on the Lake and Niagara Falls. So Fort Erie now goes to Niagara South, which then will be a part of Welland, Port Colborne, Fort Erie.
Interesting. So
and Thorold. I think they got Thorold as well.
So to dig down into that stuff a little bit, which I find a little bit interesting, is geographical areas tend to lean one way more than others.
Some can. It just depend. I mean, I think depends where you are and what's going on. I think rural areas tend to vote conservative
more,
right?
And it's like this area has been conservative since you've been in.
It has been, yeah.
Was it before you?
It was not for a short period of time.
Interesting.
Between, let's say, 1993 and 2004. So,
wow.
10, 11 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't. But I think that's because the Conservative Party was split nationally. So
right.
they split the vote.
No, and I just say that because I find it interesting when people talk politics. We're known in this area for being more blue. Welland's known for being more orange, and I don't know where. And I find that interesting now as I pay a little bit more attention. What I'll pay a little bit more attention to now is the areas that change.
Yeah.
Because,
I think sometimes it has to do, and it may change over time too. Mm-hmm. So it could maybe be demographics, the age, right? Mm-hmm. The age of individuals. It may be the work they do, maybe... it's interesting. We didn't always do that well with unions, but you saw the endorsement we got from, I think it was the Boilermakers and pipe fitters and stuff like that. Huge endorsement for the unions. So they're once again, that's changing a bit. The working class want to keep more money in their pockets, feel like their cost of living is too much. They're spending too much in taxes, all that stuff. So that changes. So the demographics of towns represent that, right? I think when you are living in a high rise in a city, you may think one way, maybe not, depending on what's going on.
It's more likely to be liberal for sure.
Could be, right?
The thing that I've seem to have tied to, I can't remember if I talked to you about it or not, because I try to figure out some of the psychology behind it, because it is very common that farmers lean conservative. Very common.
Sure, and they do, but not all of them do.
No, not all.
But it's about demographics too. Like let's talk about that for a sec. We're seeing a lot more younger people coming to look and support Pierre in a big way.
Interesting,
because they're struggling.
Yeah.
With trying to afford a house, maybe living in their parents' basement. Just things are not. Pierre talks about the contract. We used to have this thing in Canada where if you worked hard, played by the rules, you got a chance to buy a house and. But that contract's been broken.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that's why you
June
see
5th is a real day,
right?
Is that still the day that
I don't know?
takes?
It seems like it's a lot longer. I don't think they're talking about property taxes and things.
I think they're missing some too. It's so much.
It's got to be more. I think it's got to be like June 30th.
It feels like it's like November.
But, well, we are heavily taxed, right, in this country.
It is.
No question. I think we can look at when you compare other developed countries. Now, there are other places in the world that will charge more. That just happens, and people
we're up near the top, I'm sure.
Oh no, we pay an awful lot. If we compare to the jurisdictions we're closest to, the U.S. and Mexico, we're definitely at the top of that list. So I think those are real issues in people being able to afford. So I say that typically demographics were one way, but those can shift from election to election based on the issues.
Yeah, totally. Right? That's interesting. Yeah. And I'll continue down with what I was going there, because I'm trying to figure out some of the psychologies of it. And like I said, it's very common that farmers lean conservative. And then it's very common to find people that live in the city lean liberal, right? And I was trying to tie these things together, and I'm like, why? Like, what is that there? And it seems like the less dependency you have on government, the more you lean towards
a party that supports smaller government.
And when you have more dependency, you tend to lean more into that. And that's just going to be the case of your geography, because if you live in a high rise, you need the government more than when you live on a farm. On a farm, like I grew up on a farm, you're growing your own food. You don't need the government to come there and help. But when you live in a high rise, you need somebody to make sure that like you have water, that you have your sanitation is running. Like you create dependencies when you live in something like that. So it makes sense that people can be like that. I'm not saying somebody can't be one or the other.
Correct.
I've talked to liberal farmers. I've talked to conservative people living in condo buildings. It just that's seemed to me what a common theme would be where somebody's going to fall on where they look at government. Because even since I've been a little bit more transparent with, like I did a pizza review with Sam, right? Did a couple. People got mad at me, right? And I don't know if I've caught flack from doing podcasts with you or not. These don't get as much attention, but when I put more political content out there, it's interesting to see how it's, what's the right word? Not conflicting, controversial.
Yeah. And that's crazy, right? Because you think about it, you put this offer out to everybody for this one, but even, if you're doing a pizza review, he's an elected member of provincial parliament. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, well, does that mean you couldn't do a pizza review with a doctor? I've seen you do a bunch of pizza reviews, all people from all walks of life.
Yeah, totally.
So I think it's ridiculous. You're not doing the pizza review with a conservative. You're doing a pizza review with the member of provincial parliament, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, I think people can be goofy, but we didn't talk about free speech in this country, which is a hot button for me. We won't do it tonight. We'll do it another time. But that's the challenge. We need to continue to protect our free speech, because the one way that we could say we have free speech, but the way we know we don't is if you try to get canceled because you're seen talking to somebody that someone doesn't agree with.
Totally.
I like the fact I love to be able to discuss ideas with Liberals and NDP.
Yes.
And I even from the last election, the NDP candidate, his name's Namir, great guy. We still chat. As a matter of fact, we texted, maybe a month or so ago.
Yeah.
I like being able to have a conversation with people that differ. That's what we've lost. And what I feel really sad about is that we don't have that ability anymore. Someone has got to give you a hard time because you're doing that with whoever, because it's just because I'm talking to someone doesn't mean we agree. Well, you and I are having a conversation. You're not going to agree with everything I think, and I'm not agree with everything you think.
No, but we're more aligned, but not everything.
You got to be able to have a conversation, and we've lost that. And that's what bothers me, and why I say we're losing, the ability with free speech is because people want to cancel you. That's not free speech.
So quick to it.
So that's crazy.
I know. To me, that's really troublesome. I don't like when the divide happens too. Even though I lean more right, I'm not all the way, and I don't agree with everything. And I really appreciate myself having conversations. Like I had a conversation with Wayne Gates on Saturday. Mm-hmm. We were at the same Stag and Doe. I think he's the farthest away from me in political being NDP, but we had a fantastic talk.
He's a good human being,
and I have a lot of respect for Wayne.
He's a good constituency guy.
He is. Right? I've never heard anybody say anything bad about him. And I asked him too. I said, Wayne, would you ever do a podcast with me? He's like, absolutely.
For sure.
I am. Even though I love this one, I think I might be looking forward to it more because I know there's a lot of things that I'm not going to see eye to eye with him on, but I'm going to learn from him. He's going to teach me so much. Like us, I still learn from you, but we see things all in very similar goggles.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear some of his reasoning because I believe he's a great guy too, because I've never heard anybody say anything bad. I've heard a lot of good. I heard about a lot of things he's done in the community that people know and don't know. But he's got some views that I don't agree with, but he's going to help shine some lights that I'm not seeing. And I'm looking forward to that because, like you said, having conversations with people with different perspectives is healthy if you can do it properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the cancel, that's another thing that's bothered me about this current Liberal government and the NDP is
censorship.
Censorship. And We should probably devote a whole different episode to that. But it's crazy to me the amount of censorship they're proposing and looking at. And Carney supports that stuff as well, which concerns me.
I don't like that either, and I've seen it firsthand when I try and send people articles through Instagram, and it won't send because
there you go.
It says
blocked.
Blocked your government, or I don't even know what it says, but
your government has said that we can't do it. So it's crazy.
That's crazy. The media to me is like probably, I don't know what's more concerning, like the government or the media, because the media I think is maybe even more powerful than the government because they can put out a lot of false narratives that people just believe, and that's crazy.
Well, like I said, that's why you got to keep freedom of speech going.
Yeah,
because if you don't, then you know, if you end up with just one state broadcaster at the end of the day, you're never going to have any differences of opinion or divergence of opinions, right? So.
And like freedom of speech, I think, like freedom of speech is allowing people to say what they want, but there's still restrictions on it too, right? It's not like you
can't
promote.
be a complete idiot. No, for sure. Absolutely.
Hate isn't.
Hate's not acceptable.
And like
violence is not acceptable.
Right.
You know, and when you have those tools, whoever they are that are like that, then at the end of the day, those people should not have a platform just because we're going to say it's free speech. You can say whatever you want. No, you got to. You got to have respect and be respectful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost that civility piece as well. There's an issue around that as well that we need to be mindful of. So,
I mean, we've covered a lot of goodness, and I don't know how. There's still things that we could talk about or not. Like, so. I guess maybe I'll just open up one little can of something. Is what's been pretty wild with freedoms and everything is firearms. Like that one's been pretty wild. That's a controversial topic. I don't even know if you want to go down that or not or what, because like I've seen that, which I found really interesting, that they've pulled away a lot. Like no more handguns. You can't buy a handgun anymore in Canada, right? No responsible.
Well, let's be honest. Criminals are never going to register their guns.
No,
never. No. Law-abiding citizens, you know, whether it's hunters, fishers, target shooters, you know, sports shooters, all kind of stuff. These people are some of the most law-abiding citizens.
They have to be
in the freaking world. They fully disclose. So I think it's an absolute crock that the Liberals would, you know, have this attack on law-abiding firearm owners. This goes back to the crime issue. We didn't talk about crime. Crime's a huge issue. And I think, you know, it's Pierre always tells a story about 40 individuals in BC that were responsible or arrested 6,000 times. Like, think about that. Like, people are being rearrested day after day.
Right.
Well, we also know we've had an issue with theft, stolen cars. We know there's an issue with property violence. There's an issue with, you know, violent crimes being up. Well, I'm not suggesting we put away and throw away the key, you know, some kid, some teenager that steals a candy bar. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about dealing with repeat violent offenders. One of the things we just said, if you're caught 3 times smuggling guns into this country, you get a life sentence. Think about that. Mm-hmm. A lot of the issues, right? Criminals and thugs and gangs are not registering their guns. A lot of their guns are stolen and coming from across the border. Mm-hmm. We got to get tougher on the border. We got to figure that stuff out. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the people that are responsible are saying, hey, I've taken a course. I've been safety certified. I'm a member of a club. I have a gun.
Yeah.
These are not the people we should be worrying about.
I know.
We should be dealing with people that are thugs and are criminals. We are seeing home invasions happening. We had one happen in Grimsby a couple of weeks ago. It was all over social media.
Really?
5-6 guys broke glass to get in to this house. Home invasions are completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
We saw a bunch of thugs show up at a jewelry store in Grimsby twice in Grimsby of all places.
Grimsby.
This is freaking unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
And we got to deal tough on people that are repeat violent offenders. Because quite frankly, you know, if someone is, you know, charged with arson and they get to be at home with an ankle bracelet and doing house arrests, where's the crime in that? They're playing on their Game Boy. Yeah. You know, Pierre said the other night they're at home playing Grand Theft Auto.
That's hilarious.
After being released for stealing cars, right?
That's hilarious.
We've got to deal with this element.
See, and to me, that's part of the problem of where people start doing those things when they don't have the money to. And why is that? Because we work so much for the government. Like, if we had more money, there's going to be less crimes. That's how I think.
Well, I mean, that could be part of it, but the reality is, when you take away hope from people, we could all agree that these individuals have probably lost hope.
Yeah.
Because they're struggling, whatever the case is. So there's a number of things that we can do. Even when it comes to poverty, there's nothing better than a job for individuals. And if you got a terrible economy and people are down on their luck, look at food bank use. It's off the charts. We had 2 million Canadians that are visiting a food bank. Some of these are working poor. They have jobs. They're trying to struggle. All these things are caused by bad policies.
Totally.
Now, we are not going to fix it forever, but there are things we can do to make it better.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what government's job needs to be, is set policies in place that are going to make these things better, not worse on Canadians.
When you guys get in, you have a lot of work ahead of you.
Oh, my goodness. Do we ever? There's so much work. And like I said, we only covered, a half a dozen topics. There's like dozens of topics that we need to do a better job on, right? So
Yeah. I like the points you brought up about gun stuff, because I've learned over the last 5 or 6 years a little bit more about responsible gun ownership. I went and got my licenses. I did it before things changed, and I've learned more about it. And I think one of the things, like everything, that scares people is a lack of education on it.
Totally.
Because gun's bad, right?
Yep.
But that's not always the case. There are a lot of good things that come from responsible gun ownership and understanding. When I took the gun course, I became comfortable seeing and holding guns. Because before that, if I seen a gun, I wouldn't, other than the trigger, I wouldn't know how to check if it was loaded or not. And I would just be scared that if I touched it, it could shoot me. But then you learn how to disarm it.
That's why I took the gun course. I wanted to understand how to treat a firearm with respect, the respect it deserves.
Right, exactly.
I didn't know how to handle a gun. I had nothing until I took a course and figured that stuff out, right? But it's like I said, it's unbelievable the priorities that some governments place on stuff. When we take a look at going after law-abiding gun owners versus doing the proper thing with criminals. What is this, a hug-a-thug program? It's brutal. And I think at the end of the day, we need to do a better job. Right? It's crazy. So I think there's things that we can do, and it's about people having personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Or taking personal responsibility.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
Dean, this is good stuff. I don't know. I still have some fun questions that are not related to politics or wrap things up a little bit. I don't know. There's we could do this literally for 20 hours.
Yeah, we could do a Joe Rogan 3 hour.
Well, we're almost at 2.
So no way. We're not at 2 hours.
We're at 1.
No, who's going to watch that for 2 hours? Huh?
I don't know. I'm curious to see. I'm curious.
I love it. You told me half an hour.
I hope you're not late.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. The big thing I hope, back to the beginning, is I hope people find ways of finding good information. They educate themselves. I'm really hoping for a conservative government, but I know that there's people out there that are not, and I have no idea who aligns with that. But I just hope that people can do good research and figure out things. And I'm hoping this is a piece of it. Yeah, who makes it this far? I don't know.
But you're right. But people need to do their homework. They need to find out what exactly they're voting for. Right?
I think that's one of the hardest things right now, even with Google being such a great resource, because you can find a reason to support anything, 2 sides of everything, even with AI being a fantastic tool and improving by the second. I still find it difficult to find the correct information.
Well, like I said, that's part of the opportunity, the challenge, the game of politics, right?
Yeah.
Is trying to be as clear as you can be. People say, "Oh, I don't like the slogans." Well, how, we want to axe the tax, build the homes, stop the crime, fix the budget. That makes it easy. We
simplify.
But there's a lot of things under those categories of how we could do it, right? Building the homes, right? We're going to remove the tax. We're going to sell. There's 6,000 properties federal government owns. Sell those to get stuff done. There's a whole bunch of things we can do to encourage that. But you got to be a way to be able to communicate that stuff.
Yeah. So what are some good resources for people to find truths?
Well, I say, why don't you subscribe on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the leaders? We put a policy out every day. we started last Monday. Today's Tuesday. Yeah. We got 8 or 9 policies already out.
Yeah.
They will maybe fit under some of those categories, right? Acts to tax, but there's more to it than that. The full platform probably won't be out until a little bit later. You notice the Liberals have a hard time, so they want to steal everything that we're doing, right, at the end of the day. So but follow Mark Carney. They're going to put stuff out. Follow Jagmeet Singh. Find out what they are. But it takes work. That's the problem, right?
It does.
When we got to do our homework at school, just like in life, it's not always easy, right? You got to go back. You got to spend the time. You're working 40 hours. Maybe you're traveling.
Yeah.
If those people got to commute into Toronto, maybe you're commuting a couple hours a day.
Yeah, I know.
Now you're 50, 60 hours, and you got to come home and put food on the table. You got kids. Yeah. Do you want to spend a couple hours at night trying to research the platform?
It's tough.
You need to, because it's for the sake and it's for the future of our country. But a lot of times people just turn on the TV and summarize the sound bites on mainstream media, right?
And I want to give credit to one of your MPs. My favorite MP as far as creating content, and I forget her last name, but I know she's up in Kawartha, and I know it's Michelle.
Oh, Michelle Ferrari, yeah.
Ferrari?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that's how you said it or anything, but I follow her on Instagram, and I give her a lot of credit because she is consistent with her content. I like how she's doing stories. I'm not even sure exactly how she stands on a lot of things, but as being a content creator, I appreciate her content because she does a lot of stories. She's creating content, and
big time. Yeah.
I give her. I don't know who else is doing content. I haven't, because I follow some of the other parties and other people, and hers is my favorite content, even over yours, Dean.
That's okay.
She does a great job.
I thought you were going to say she's your favorite MP, but you said favorite content.
You're my favorite MP by far. But good. She does such a good job.
We have a number of people that create some great content. Michelle Rempel is another one that creates great content.
I want to see.
Yeah, check Michelle Rempel. She does a great job.
Where is she?
She's out in Alberta.
Oh, Alberta.
Yeah, nice. she's got a riding in Calgary.
Yeah, like if you like, I would love.
I give you half a dozen of our men and women that create great content. The two of those individuals right there do a great job.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
You know who creates great content? I'm telling you, it's Pierre. Do you watch his stuff? Do you subscribe to him? Because I'm telling you, if we talk about this national energy corridor I just talked about, he did like a 4-minute video that's posted to Facebook, X, and Instagram. It's phenomenal. The content's incredible.
He has done good, and some I don't want to say bad, but I think Michelle's better.
Ferrari, two Michelles, Michelle Ferrari and Michelle Rempel.
I think because I think Pierre's doing a good job.
I think he does incredible content, right? So
I think she does a great job.
Yeah, she does. She's a great.
And like I said, I don't even know all of the things she's saying. I'm just looking at it from a strict content.
Yeah.
Because like she's doing stories. Like I've seen her before doing stories. I'm pretty sure in Parliament, and like. I could be wrong, but she's walking through the hallway talking about whatever just happened. And I like that's stuff that I do. And I like talking about transparency. And I know there's different levels of transparency between business, government, personal life, all that stuff. But like when I see something like that, I have a high appreciation because it's authentic, regardless of what's coming out of her mouth. It's the same reason that I appreciate and I don't even care who makes it to this part, but with Trump, I appreciate that a lot of things that he says it's what is on his mind, and even whether he's lying, bluffing, bullshitting, or I disagree with it, at least I feel he's being authentic for the most part. So I appreciate those things sometimes even more than if I agree with the person or not. So like that's things that I like.
Leaders could be scripted, right?
Yeah.
So you can see lots of politicians that read from a script, and if I'm talking to people and I'm reading a speech versus I'm doing a speech from my heart, I'll always say, Dean, it's much better when you speak from your heart.
Totally.
Okay, you got four things you want to get across. We'll talk about those things and weave in your stories. But when you read a speech, you don't seem real. So, to your point is, if people can speak from their heart and, make it authentic, then that is always better than reading a speech.
That's what I appreciate. And I do understand when there's times and places for speeches.
Absolutely, for sure.
There's 100% when that's necessary. But that's the the content I always like is as authentic as possible. And that's one of the things I like about over on that side, because I know right now with what's going on with the trade war and everything can really hurt us, but I still appreciate authenticity. That's one thing that wins me over
and that's
a lot.
tough, right? I think that's one thing that, people can complain about when it comes to politicians is the lack thereof, right? So that's why it's important to be as authentic as possible.
Yeah,
right?
and that's what I appreciate about you a lot too, because like anytime we've ever talked on camera off, I like hearing what you've got to say, and I believe a lot. When I say a lot, I can't say everything because I don't know.
What? You don't believe everything I say?
I don't know. I can't think of anything.
I try to be the same person.
Yeah, and I respect
on camera,
that.
off camera, right?
And that's when I thanked you at the beginning. I really mean it, because I feel like you're such a good representative of our area. Because I don't even know who the people that you're running up against. I don't care. And I see politicians other places that are part of blue, not blue, that I just wouldn't want representing me at all. Like, I feel confident when you're representing us. We've talked a lot of grand things, Pierre, all these things, but I feel good that when you're in Parliament, you're in our community, that you're doing good things. So, like, I really mean that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, like, that's, yeah, because there's a lot of people out there I wouldn't feel that way.
Well, there's a reason why politicians have a reputation.
Okay, I'll wrap up with some fun stuff.
All right.
I can't remember if I did these last time or not, because we did one. Did I ask you this last time?
I don't remember what I did yesterday. You're going to ask me what we did last time.
Okay, fair.
This could be all new content, even if it was old.
Okay, I hope you're never here. But if you were on death row, what would your last meal be?
Oh, it's going to be pizza for sure. Extra cheese, pepperonis, mushrooms, and ham.
I love it, because you're a food guy too. We've broken bread a couple times.
That or like it could be that or a burger or steak, right? So there you go. All those good proteins.
So you answered 2 for 1. And what do you like on your pizza?
Yeah, extra cheese, pepperonis, mushrooms, and ham. Mm. And if it depends on the ham. Sometimes the ham is a little bit too fatty. Mm-hmm. Then it's just pepperoni, mushrooms. And it's funny. I like canned mushrooms. I like fresh mushrooms, but I like canned mushrooms more.
I'm on the same page. That's funny. People make fun of me when I say that.
I just like it. I'll eat fresh mushrooms all day long, because mushrooms are mushrooms, got to be mushrooms, right? So.
Well, the fresh mushrooms on pizza, they get dried out sometimes, and they're not as good.
Yeah.
When they're canned, you get.
They've been sitting on that. They've been sitting on I want water, that fluid. For how long? I don't know. Maybe we don't want to know. Maybe we should just go with fresh.
It's hilarious.
I like what I like though. So,
favorite kind or era of music?
Favorite music. I love, I love all kinds. I think when music's good, it's good. It could be good classical, good country. I'm like an 80s guy though. Like I love, 80s on the soundtrack, or an XM or the blend or something like that. So
when you're driving up to Ottawa, you tend to put on 80s more?
Yeah, I do that. I could do that. I can also listen to some church music as well. Like, my dad loved gospel quartets, right? Gospel quartets. So I got a huge variety of music.
I feel you. See that I feel the same way. I appreciate good music because
great classical is great. If it's terrible, it's terrible, right?
Yeah,
it won't matter. But some of that stuff that was written was just like, wow, that's great stuff, right? So
when I could be in different moods, but even with that, what I go back to, and this is more about you, but is old school hip hop, like. More times than not, I'll put that on. But yeah, there's different. Like I'll put on anything. I've got a wide range on my radio too. This one's a little bit deeper. And if I did ask you it before, it'd be interesting to see if it's the same or not, because this is definitely something that can change, like all of them. But the meaning of life.
Meaning of life. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the meaning of life is trying to be a decent person. Mm-hmm. Taking care of your family. Loving your wife and your kids, and wanting what's best for them. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people that believe in a higher calling too. I mean, I believe in God. I believe in my faith has changed over the years in terms of what I believe or don't believe. I grew up in a very strict, Mom, this is for you, Baptist home. It was crazy strict. Like no movies, no dances, no nothing.
Really?
So
I don't think you told me that before.
Man, it was hardcore. So Christian school, the whole bit. So for a kid, you could be rebellious.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I believe in definitely there's a relationship with a maker, right? Mm-hmm. So I have a faith, and so that's part of that meaning of life as well, right?
I like it.
But I see how that plays out. Some people are more religious, and they believe more about the process than they do about the relationship. So it's about a relationship with a God, and then how you act that out in life, right? Sometimes if I'm a preachy SOB, that's not cool. Yeah. And if I'm a rules-based, you got to go to church 12 times a week, that's not okay too. So if you make it about the relationship and about people, then I think that's pretty cool.
I think that's a very good foundation for that all. I lie somewhere in there too. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah. But I think when we take the rules out, we take out the process. So because some churches, some organizations are very legalistic in how they do that stuff, and you realize it's about a personal relationship. That makes it. Now you may still choose to go to a church or a church that you like or not, but the question is what's your relationship with your maker, right? So I think I've struggled with that over the years. Like
it's a tough one.
How do you deal with it? What's important? How do you how do you reconcile all that stuff? And then I realized that's part of the reason why we do what we do with our families, with our friends, with our jobs and what we do. And I think when you have that perspective, it makes it easier to do what you do, right?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like it. If you could travel anywhere, or where would you go? Or maybe I like that.
So I've been to quite a few places in Europe. Where I've not been and where I want to go is Italy.
Same. So
I had a chance, I think, in the course of a year to go there 3 times. Next door neighbor's wedding, highly regret not going because work got in the way. Another time was with another friend that was going to be there. So I had a chance over the course of a year and a half, 2 years to be in Italy 3 times. I had trips plans that I had to cancel as a result of work, being an MP. Yeah. So I really regret that.
It's on your radar still.
I still love to go there. We keep going down. I know that you got some connections with Malta. I would love to go to Malta. Like I think Malta's, it's also part of that. Yeah, the extension there. So definitely, there's a few places. Haven't been to Spain. Love to do that. Been to Portugal. Love freaking Portugal. Go back there again in a heartbeat. So there's a number of places that I love to check out. So
I like it. I haven't been to Italy yet. It's on the
bucket list for sure.
This year, just to throw in a spot that I was never sure if I'd ever go to or not, but I'm going to. That was on the bucket list is Japan. That's somewhere
I've been there. It's pretty cool. Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. Best piece of advice you can give anyone?
I think the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. I think there's nothing more than that. Your position in life should never matter how you treat people. If you've got money, if you've got education, or you've got power. Those are the 3 things, right? I don't care what you have or who you think you are. If you treat people poorly, you're an asshole. Full stop. And if you think you got a PhD and you could treat me poorly, you're an asshole. If you got all the money in the world but you treat me terribly, you're an asshole. If you got power and you treat people like the frontline service worker differently than you would treat someone with money, power, or fame, you're an asshole. So you got to treat people. I don't care what your job is. I've always done that. I've treated my staff. I've treated, when I had businesses the same way. I think that's key. Golden rule is key.
I think so too. Yeah. I completely agree. I think when people try to paint people in pictures of being, you hear it in the media, racist or fascist or these other terms. The one thing that you can paint with me is I hate assholes too. So whatever you want to paint that in.
If you're an asshole, you're an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. That's not something I want. So I don't care. I don't
treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah, exactly.
Full stop.
I know.
Forget about position, power, and all that crap.
I know.
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of people forget, which is unfortunate because when going back to religions, when I studied multiple religions, it's the common theme amongst so many religions is the golden rule.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people forget that.
Always, right? Yeah.
I think that's a good one, Dean. Who played a big role in who you are today?
Well, as much as I want to complain about my parents, my parents treated me poorly. My parents were pretty cool.
Nice.
They were strict, and they believed what they believed, but they shaped, they definitely shaped who I am. Like, my mom and dad were never impressed with people or stuff. So they treated everyone the same.
Nice.
So if you're a millionaire, they treated you the same. If you were famous. So I sort of adopted that.
Nice.
So I respect people that are smart, that are
I got to
have done well.
one day.
What's that? No, I respect that, but I'm not like, like I'm not like in awe.
Yeah.
I respect people that have done a good job or have succeeded in life, but that doesn't mean I worship what they've done. I just respect it. So there's a difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
so
sense.
I could meet a rock star, and I have.
Yeah.
I respect the talent. I don't think of them as being any more important or better than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just respect the talent, right?
And that's good. That comes with meeting some of these people too, and realizing that they're people.
They got their own stuff they got to deal with.
Exactly. We're all human.
Exactly. And sometimes you meet these people and go, wow, I don't know what I saw in that person before, because they're not that impressive, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. So yeah, for sure.
This is one that's a little bit, I don't even have it included here, but it made me think of it, that question. But who's been either a big role or a mentor or a big help in your political career? Like who's been a big influence?
I think the reason I got involved in politics was a guy by the name of Preston Manning. He's the one that started the Reform Party, and then the Alliance, changed the name to the Alliance. Like, this is a guy that I really respected, because he was somebody that thought of politics differently. Now, people try to castigate him and say that he was a crazy man or this or that. This is a guy that went to bed at night and read the constitutions of other countries, as that was his bedtime reading. This guy, his father, who hosted a weekly Bible show or, Christian, was also the premier of Alberta for 25 years. Think about that. Wow. I don't know of anybody that could be the premier leader of any province for that long, unless they were upstanding, they were a decent human being, and they did a good job. They
had some integrity.
Yeah, and that was the word I'm looking for. Yeah. So I always, Preston's the reason why I got involved in politics.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's a name I haven't heard before, so I'm going to look into him later. Yeah. You gave me some good notes here to look into after. What do you want to be remembered for?
Being kind, being decent, right? Never forgetting about the little guy, never forgetting, part of the reason why I love my job so much is being able to help people that need help, that maybe can't get it in that way. So I think that's kind of why I do what I do, is trying to help those that can't help themselves. Right?
And I would say you're doing a good job of that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Couple more. What would you do if you won $50 million?
$50 million. Wow. That's a lot of money. Wow. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it is in our budget. It's a drop in the bucket.
Well, I'm not going to help pay down the deficit. I'll tell you that right now. So I think there would be some money for my family.
Nice.
For sure. There'd be some money from some organizations that I do give to or have given to in the past. So I think there's a number of things. So, I mean, I don't know what amounts I would give to my family. I don't know. I have no idea. I have to think that all through. But there'd be money for, and then some friends, not all friends, but some people that I've been able to. And then I'd love to find a way to help people as well. I think when you can give money to people that don't know that you've given them money or tried to help them out, I think that's the most meaningful.
Anonymous?
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's nice when you can do that. So that's good. I think, those, and so I don't know what that would look like, but I think some of those things would definitely be what I'd be interested in. There's definitely certain organizations that I feel, affection for and affinity to, that I would also look at giving to as well.
So if you won today, would you still be running?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've got a commitment and I've got a responsibility, and I don't think my work's done yet. So I would definitely do that for sure.
I don't think I'd normally ask that part, but I think it applies a little bit more here but I like that.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this one. I only got a couple more. Would you rather live in the city or the country?
Country. All day long. We know our neighbors. Our neighbors are awesome, right?
Yeah. True.
You don't always know your neighbors in the city. And the city, I love to go visit the city.
It's a great place to visit.
The sense of community you get from living in the country, it can't be beat. When I opened my first restaurant, I came to Lincoln, in Beamsville in particular, and that was back in 1992. That was like 33 years ago.
Wow.
So I remember at that time, the Pioneer in Beamsville by the food complex, where I opened that first Wendy's, I was in there today buying gift cards for the people that deliver our signs, some gas cards at the Pioneer there.
Right.
And I went in there, and the same lady was there that was managing that store.
No way.
We talked. Her name's Debbie.
No way.
She runs the Pioneer in Beamsville at the highway. I went in to buy gift cards, gas cards for our sign people. And we were talking today.
That's
I saw her and I talked to her and she says, she's been there for 33 years. Isn't that wild?
That's wild.
That's cool.
Awesome.
That's small town. That's kind of country. That's community. And I remember going and, I do the Citizen of the Year every year in Pelham.
Oh, nice.
And the Kinsmen put it on and the men's, and they freaking do an amazing job. And you show up there and it's a sense of community. All the people that have won the award before are there doing it's just a great event. So it's a pretty cool thing.
There's some really cool community events out there.
That's what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. 2 more. Favorite movie? Or that's a kind
so I think one of my It's a Wonderful Life. If we're talking about Christmas and believing in people,
is that black and white?
Yeah, it is. It's old school, baby. Old school. I like the Christmas Carol for that reason. So you want to talk about a variety of music? Wait till I give you my favorites when it comes to the movie. So It's a Wonderful Life, a Christmas Carol, and I would love to see like a Christmas Carol in places like there's like the American Christmas Carol. There's all these versions of a Christmas Carol. Love them all.
Nice.
Love them all. And then I love The Beekeeper.
Oh, I haven't seen.
Oh, dude, you've got to see that.
What's that?
Jason Statham.
Beekeeper.
Jason Statham. And then I love The Equalizer. Denzel Washington, 1, 2, and 3. Have you seen The Equalizer?
No, I don't think so.
Joe. Those are the best movies.
Denzel's great too.
Denzel's amazing. So 1, 2, and 3, both basically, this is a story.
Don't ruin it.
No, it's a story of a guy that is in helping someone with justice issues. So he's righting the wrong.
Oh.
So there's a little bit of violence. I'm not going to lie. So I've gone from It's a Wonderful Life to The Beekeeper, and then I had to throw in Mamma Mia too. Talk about a great movie. I think that's
a musical.
It's a movie too, but you're right. It's definitely a musical.
Okay,
they had 2 movies and a musical. It's absolutely.
I haven't seen that one.
You got to add it because it's just a feel good type of thing. It's they do 2 of them. So you want to talk about a genre? So then I got black and whites for you. I've got modern day vigilante movies, and I've got Mamma Mia. How's that for a eclectic bunch?
I like that.
And there's a bunch of others like Rudy. Have you seen Rudy?
Oh yeah, Rudy's
a classic too.
Notre Dame, yeah,
right. That's an amazing movie.
I haven't seen that one in a while. That is
there's a few, and I'll sit. I gave you 6 movies that I love, or 7. But like I said, I could add another like 10 to that list as well.
Well, you gave me a few to watch. I like that.
Oh, those are all. I can't believe I haven't seen those. They're awesome.
Last one. You're the first person I'm going to ask this one. This one was inspired the other day, and then we'll wrap it up because we hit the 2 hours. This one's interesting too. I don't know if you had 30 days to live, what would you do?
30 days to live?
Because it's interesting. I was having this conversation the other day. Sorry to interrupt. Maybe I'll give you a second to think about it too, because I think that a lot of us live our lives. We don't know when we're going to die, right? And I think if we did know, it would change how we do things, better or worse, right? I live a life of delayed gratification. I do a lot of work to try and have something later. But if I had 30 days to live, I wouldn't be spending 2 hours a day exercising.
Would you have pizza every night for dinner? That's what I want to know.
I'd be eating a lot.
Pizza, burger, burger.
Steak. Yeah.
Steak. Pizza, burger, steak. Pizza, burger, steak.
Just rotating everything. Yeah, I'd probably just eat myself. I'd probably die in 15.
You may hasten your untimely demise, right? So, so there's a couple of things. And, when you say this, then it makes you wonder why you spend as much time as you do doing what you're doing. I think one of the things that I've always tried to do is encourage people. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes with a job, it goes against what your job and what you do. There's a bit of a disconnect sometimes. I think we get busy with life. We get busy with work, and we're discouraged with what's going on in our life that we don't always encourage people. So I think that I would definitely want to spend time reaching out to people that have done something or been meaningful in my life and probably tell them that. And I don't think we tell people that enough. So then the question is, hey, why don't you do it now? well, we're busy with life and we think we have more than 30 days. We think we're going to live forever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think, definitely, I would spend time with my wife. I would definitely want to do that, and family, people that matter. We have lots of acquaintances in life, you and I. We don't have lots of friends.
True story.
So acquaintances are fine, but they're not the people that are probably there when you've got, some tough time. And I don't know if I want to tell anybody. I would want to just reach out and do that. I watched a movie the other day on Netflix, which was and I don't remember the name of it. It's because what is it, new out right now? I think it's like the top 10, and it was a story of a girl that had a list as a 13-year-old kid, and she put that list aside. Her mom found it. Her mom was dying. Her mom died, and did all these video messages said, when you knock something off the list, you can see another video. I like that idea of being able to leave messages for people beyond the grave, like kind of like, hey, I want to,
that's pretty cool.
I think and I've seen, a couple movies where they've done stuff like that. And I think that, being able to have messages, but then it makes you wonder, why are we not doing it now? If it's such a great idea,
it is.
Why do we wait until we have a chance? And I just think that's one of the things, I had a birthday recently, and you gave me a message.
You got it.
So my wife reached out. My wife reached out to a ton of people. Not everyone gave me a message.
Yeah.
So you took the time to do it. So thanks. I appreciate that.
I'm glad you got it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I've been meaning to say something. I haven't said anything. Yeah. But, so I think from that perspective, why don't we do more of that stuff, right? Because that's the stuff that matters. And, I think about that. I had a bunch of people reach out. And it was like 45 minutes of, people saying some nice things. And I think, why don't we do that for people we know in our lives? Like, just take the time for no reason.
It's tough. Life is tough
because we're busy.
Yeah, we're
busy doing things that are not necessarily important, but they're things that we need to do like right away, right? There's things that, what does that say? Doing things that are important versus things that are, I forget what that term is. So
I want to play off that a little bit, because I think about these things too. And I love that you're mentioning it, because I can't agree more that life takes away from the important things.
Right.
And one of the things I think that is, and I hate pointing fingers, because there's always 3 or 10 coming back at us.
Yeah.
But it is part of, I think, the waste from our government, because we lose so much time because we're trying to be able to survive.
Right. No, you're right.
If we're able to hold on to a few extra bucks, we'll have a little bit of extra time.
Right. What are we doing?
We're
working, trying to earn a living so that we can retire one day.
Right.
And I think, one of the craziest things, people, probably know people, we all do, that work to be 65. They worked on the line. They did their part to pay for their house, do their stuff. And they said, I'll retire and then I'll travel. Then I'll do this. Then I'll do that. And they're dead within a month or 6 months or a year.
If they make it there.
5 years.
Yeah.
What a cruel injustice in this world to think we work our whole lives.
Yeah.
And then we realize that. So I think that's why it's important now to take time to travel. Things you do, I know you do. Yeah. I do. Spend time with family and friends.
The balance.
I think the older we get, the more we realize that those people that are important.
Yeah.
And, as a member of parliament, I'm out at events all the time with people that I don't know. It's part of my job and I love it. But then I realize if I'm doing that, what am I doing with my family? Am I committing
sacrifices?
Am I committing the same or equal amount of time?
Yeah.
So that's always, I think that's important, right?
And that's one of the things when I thank you for what you do, because you and all the MPs, even if I don't like some of them, you guys are away from your families.
You sacrifice the time, right?
It's a good amount of time.
It's a crazy amount of time, right?
Like you're up in Ottawa a lot.
Well, at least half the year, right?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot away from everyone. So that's what I mean. I appreciate that. Even the ones that I disagree with, I still respect the fact.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
And the ones that live furthest away are way more, because you could take them a day or two. Like I'm in Ontario.
Yeah.
I could drive to Ottawa in, let's say, 6 hours.
Yeah.
I can also fly up there. So it's a 45-minute flight, but I got to go to Toronto. It's still 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
I do that every week, but some people could take them a day and a half, depending if they live in northern Alberta, northern BC, they live in the territories.
Totally.
It's not always easy.
Time lost traveling.
Take them. And then when they can have, depending on the community they live in, what they need to do to actually get to Ottawa, because they don't have the if I was going out of Ottawa from Toronto, there's probably 8 or 9, or I don't know. Let's say there's 8 or 9 flights a day with Air Canada. WestJet's got 7 or, you know what I'm saying? Like there's all these options for people living in Ontario. Those options don't exist for people living west, east, and north.
Totally.
Right?
They're making sacrifices.
They're making huge sacrifices. And there's their family that pays the ultimate sacrifice. And so another thing recently, when I have colleagues or former colleagues that pass, I try and make an effort to go, because I realize that their family is grieving and their family gave up a lot of. So for me, as I get older, that means more. I make more of a commitment to go to funerals that I wouldn't have done early on in my career, because I just realized that people are their spouse, they
went through a lot.
They may have spent more time with me than they did with their actual family.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, when I say me, I mean Ottawa, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Lots of sacrifices. Yeah, I respect it a lot. This was great.
Yeah, we'll do it again. There's more things we got to knock off the list, but there's
we
just
could
so
be
much,
in here
right?
20 hours. Like I literally put protein bars in here in case.
What do we got here? Let's see what's going on here. What are
these are good.
Chocolate dough.
Try it out if you want. But
chocolate dough.
Yeah, it's 20 grams of protein, 210 calories. These are a quick snack.
These are like healthy, right? They're healthy for us, right?
Close enough.
Hey, hold on. I'll have to check the ingredients.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on that. Eh?
It's my quick snack when I have it, but I literally packed this because we could, like, Dean, you're great to talk to. And like we only uncovered 2 hours of topic. We could literally be in here 20 hours.
Yeah, we go well. So
this is great.
We'll do another time.
Yeah.
We did one before. We'll do more again.
Yeah. So just last thing, election is April 28th.
Get out and vote, right?
Please vote. Hopefully
you got to get out and vote. That's part of the democratic process, right? You don't want to let like a few people determine who your next prime minister is, and do your homework, right? You got to research. You got to figure out what the issues are. You got to figure out, do you feel better after the last 10 years? And this is like more of the same, or is it time to change direction for the country? That's the great thing about democracy. Yeah, what do they say? It's the best of the worst system, right? It's much better than communism or all that stuff.
Dictatorship,
right. Even benevolent dictatorships, because people change and they can be bad. So I think that's important. You need to know your issues, and when people don't do a good job, you can change the laundry, right? It's time to change them out. That's what's good. But if you vote for more of the same, that's not good. So. No. Not good at all.
And if people want to follow you, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook. They find you by looking Dean Allison.
Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And very fairly active on all those.
Yeah.
Especially during the campaign, right?
Yeah.
So.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the protein bar. Appreciate it. I came for the protein bar. That's why I came. So.